Chapter 198. Florida's appearance had caused the door to shatter. The two of them had no choice but to switch rooms and pay 20 gold coins for the damaged door. This time, Phoebe had asked for 2 rooms, so Han Shuo no longer had the opportunity to steal her beauty. When Phoebe returned to her room to rest, Han Shuo didn't remain idle either. Han Shuo found the cupboard in this room and set up the transportation matrix. He then adjusted his mental strength and released a dark mist spell in the cupboard before walking into the transportation matrix. The cemetery of death was as cold and desolate as ever. When Han Shuo walked out, he saw that the enormous Gilbert had revealed his true form and was sleeping amidst the pure white bones. He didn't notice Han Shuo's arrival at all. After 2 days of rushing about, Gilbert had shouldered a heavy responsibility. His body had once again been injured and should be truly tired. Han Shuo didn't disturb him and went to the place where the Earth Elite Zombie and Yin demons were being refined. First, Han Shuo channeled magical yuan into the Yin demon cave. When Han Shuo discovered that there were only 9 wraiths left in the Yin demon cave and that they were still fighting each other day and night, he understood that the day of harvesting Yin demons was getting closer and closer. The Earth Elite Zombie in the place of Extreme Earth exuded an enormous aura of life. The earth chi that surrounded the entire cemetery of death was becoming thinner and thinner. Clouds of gray aura enveloped the center of the place of Extreme Earth, as if a large hand was gripping it tightly and slowly pulling it in. A mysterious connection came from the center of the place of Extreme Earth. Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment before a wave of joy suddenly surged into his heart. When he carefully sensed it, Han Shuo discovered that this joy came from the Earth Elite Zombie buried deep underground. It seemed that Han Shuo's arrival had made the Earth Elite Zombie feel joy. After absorbing the Earth Chi in the place of Extreme Earth for such a long time, in addition to the nourishment of the precious materials that Han Shuo had spent a huge amount of money to purchase, the Earth Elite Zombie was no longer a simple zombie warrior. He already had the most instinctive senses. Han Shuo had found the 3 places of Extreme Earth, wood, and water. With the help of Phoebe's trading company, Han Shuo was confident that he could purchase enough materials to refine the earth, wood, and water elite zombies. As long as these 3 types of zombies were formed, the strength of Han Shuo's body would greatly increase. If he could also find the places of extreme metal and fire together, Han Shuo would possess a terrifying demonic formation when he gathered the 5 elemental zombies. When that time came, he would have even more right to speak in this world. Seeing that everything was normal here, Han Shuo didn't wake up Gilbert and silently returned to the inn in the Valley of Sunshine. After climbing onto the bed, Han Shuo sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. His entire body relaxed as he slowly sank into a meditative state, not relaxing at all to increase his mental strength. Phoebe came over early the next morning. Her originally straight hair had been tied up high, and her sky-blue dress set off Phoebe's temperament even more elegant. She naturally came over and grabbed Han Shuo's arm. Phoebe pulled Han Shuo outside and said, "Let's go, we'll continue strolling around the Valley of Sunshine today and try to collect all the materials you need." Han Shuo gladly agreed. He'd originally only been collecting materials to refine the Wood Elite Zombie, but because of the discovery of the place of extreme water, Han Shuo had started to prepare the materials he needed to refine the Water Elite Zombie in advance. As the border between the 3 kingdoms, the Valley of Sunshine was filled with an endless stream of merchants. All sorts of strange goods could be found here. When Han Shuo and Phoebe searched patiently, they indeed found quite a few materials they needed. The noon sun shone down on the Valley of Sunshine, bathing the entire valley in sunlight. It was so warm that it made people feel very comfortable. Walking out of a shop, Phoebe rubbed her lower abdomen and smiled sweetly at Han Shuo. "I'm a bit hungry. Let's find a place to get something to eat first. You're familiar with this place. Just take me to where there's delicious food," Han Shuo replied with a smile. It was said that when a demonic arts practitioner reached a certain level, they could live for hundreds of years without eating or drinking. They didn't need to use grains to nourish their body. However, Han Shuo hadn't reached this level yet. Besides, food was also a form of enjoyment for Han Shuo, apart from replenishing his body's energy. Phoebe led the way in front, and the two walked into a small shop. A few dwarves about 1 meter tall walked out and politely welcomed Hanshu and Phoebe to their seats. This shop wasn't very big, and the decorations inside weren't luxurious either. There were only a few simple chairs, but it was packed with people. A few merchants wearing luxurious fur coats and sparkling diamond rings on their fingers sat lazily on the tables and chairs that weren't very spacious, wolfing down the food on their plates without a care for their image. Hanshu and Phoebe sat down at a table for two by the window. Phoebe didn't ask for Hanshu's opinion, and directly instructed a dwarf next to her. "Bring the best food in the shop." The dwarf smiled faintly and bowed courteously, then quickly left Phoebe and Hanshu aside. He was probably busy with something. Dwarves are really a strange race. Some dwarves are skilled at forging ironware, some are skilled at brewing fine wine, and some love to cook. When they fall in love with their craft, they can always bring some incredible masterpieces to people. The dwarves in this shop come from a remote mountain range in Kasi Empire. The joy of their life is to cook all kinds of delicious food. The food made by their hands is simply unforgettable. Phoebe explained to Hanshu with a smile. Hanshu, who came from another world, had enjoyed the influence of China's culinary culture. After tasting some of the food in this world, he always felt that the difference between the food here and the extensive and profound culinary culture of China was simply not small at all. To be honest, Hanshu really didn't believe that the food here would be more exquisite and tasty than what Hanshu had eaten in hotels before. Therefore, he didn't hold much hope and just smiled in response to Phoebe's words. The business here was very good. From the number of customers and their status, it could be seen that the extravagant customers didn't dislike the small size of this place. In particular, Hanshu could tell from the way some of the elegant noblewomen ate that they really did enjoy the food on their plates. While Hanshu and Phoebe were chatting with smiles, the dwarf who had just left carried 2 large plates of strange food and gently placed them in front of Hanshu and Phoebe. It looked like a strange kind of meat cooked to a glossy color. A strange aroma wafted into Hanshu's mouth and nose, surprising Hanshu. On the other side, Phoebe held a knife and fork in front of Hanshu and had already started chewing. Looking at her appearance, it was obvious that she really enjoyed this kind of food. When Hanshu tried to cut a piece of meat and put it in his mouth, his brows suddenly relaxed. Then, his mouth was filled with a wonderful feeling, like a kind of mysterious magic. The delicious taste of the food continuously lingered in Hanshu's heart, mouth, and nose without dissipating. With his appetite greatly awakened, Hanshu, who had just taken a small bite, immediately began to chew heartily, wolfing down the food on his plate. When his stomach was slightly bloated, Hanshu burped and praised. "It's really good. No wonder there are so many people trying to squeeze into this small store. Friend, we meet again." At this moment, Florida walked in from the entrance. Florida, wearing a white magic robe, stood in front of the door and looked coldly at Hanshu. Phoebe, who was still enjoying the food on her plate, raised her head to look at Florida when she heard this. She then waved her hand to call the little dwarf over and threw a bag of gold coins on the table. She stood up and said to Hanshu, "Let's go out." Hanshu's expression was indifferent as he waved his hand and said to Phoebe, "I have nothing to talk about with him. Just tell him directly. If he continues to pester me and won't let go, I'll be more than happy to keep him company." After yesterday's exchange, Hanshu understood that Florida's strength was indeed unfathomable. However, Hanshu now possessed both magic and necromancy magic. He also had the mysterious little skull, the Earth Elite Zombie, and the 3 demons on the verge of forming. With all of these strengths added together, Hanshu wasn't afraid of Florida at all. With his magic rapidly improving every day, Hanshu didn't need to lower his head in front of anyone. Phoebe started slightly when she heard Hanshu's words, then smiled sweetly and said, "I understand." Slowly moving, Phoebe got up and walked towards Florida. The smile she just shown to Hanshu was replaced by cold arrogance when facing Florida. When they arrived at the door, Phoebe pointed at Hanshu and said to Florida, "He's my boyfriend, I think we have nothing to say." Business is business, but you don't have the right to interfere in my life. I hope you won't disturb me in the future. Although he'd long since been mentally prepared, when Florida heard Phoebe's blunt words with his own mouth, he was still momentarily absent-minded. Different from how he treated Han Shaw, when Florida faced Phoebe, the rigid lines on his face became very gentle. Even his voice was abnormally gentle as he stared closely at Phoebe and said, "Where did this brat come from? What can he bring to you? Why did you choose him? Sorry, this matter has nothing to do with you. I hope you take care of yourself." Phoebe's expression was cold as she spoke in an equally cold voice. Nodding, Florida laughed ruefully and looked at Phoebe and Han Shu in the distance. He said, "All right," 3 times in a row, then suddenly turned around and left. "Please bring another plate of the same food." Han Shaw snorted coldly and then said to the dwarf beside him with a smile. Chapter 199. After filling their stomachs and walking out of the dwarven food store, Phoebe and Han Shaw strolled through all of Glorious Sunshine Tanai's stores for a while. Phoebe then went to find the Cairo mercenary band to purchase the store with the place of extreme water for Han Shaw. Han Shaw headed to the store that Emily was at alone, planning to find Emily and probe Florida's background. The old man was still standing guard at the door. This store was selling armor for knights from the Lancelot Empire. Because the sky hadn't darkened yet, there were a few people dressed like knights in the hall, shopping for knights' clothing. When the old man saw Han Shaw walk in, he smiled and gestured to Han Shaw, pointing to the courtyard in the back. Han Shaw understood and pretended to pick out the knight's clothing. He walked in through the door that led to the courtyard in the back. "How did you provoke Florida?" When Han Shaw asked Emily with a cold expression on his face, Emily was obviously taken aback and responded with a question of surprise. "Apart from the information that everyone already knows, do you have any other information about him? I know that the Dark Mantle must have information that no one knows about him." Han Shaw looked at Emily and said. Emily's brow furrowed slightly as she looked intently at Han Shaw. "Just what is going on?" Han Shaw briefly explained what had happened last night to Emily. Emily then said angrily, "I've long since heard that this Florida is arrogant and conceited, but who would have thought that he's actually this domineering? The Valley of Sunshine isn't even under the control of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band now, yet he dares be so arrogant." Han Shaw's somewhat displeased mood suddenly improved a bit when he saw that Emily was also angry. He then said gently, "Just what is this Florida's background? The Glorious Sun Tanai is a Dark Mantle stronghold. Their main mission is to collect the materials here. Florida isn't from our Lancelot Empire, nor is he from Kasi Empire. He comes from a vassal state of our Lancelot Empire. His grandfather is Grand Magus Ferguson of the Church of Light. His status in the Church of Light is very high, and it's said that he has great hopes of becoming a sacred magus. Florida grew up in the Church of Light and was personally taught magic by his grandfather. In addition to light magic, he also studied lightning magic. This was a secret that most people didn't know. With his grandfather's guidance and his own extraordinary talent, he had become an archmage 3 years ago at such a young age. The Dark Mantle had once paid close attention to him, believing that he would become one of the super experts on the continent in the future. However, Florida didn't join the Church of Light. He suddenly left the church a few years ago and went to the Valley of Sunshine, joining the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. Because of his great strength, he'd won the trust of the leader of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band, Jason, in an extremely short amount of time. Jason had even entrusted his only daughter to him, but during a battle against bandits, old Jason had accidentally died in battle, and his daughter had also gone missing. It's said that this matter seemed to have something to do with Florida, but no one had any evidence to prove this. After Jason's death, Florida naturally took control of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. Unfortunately, because some people suspected that this matter had something to do with Florida, some core members angrily withdrew from the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band and the Valley of Sunshine, allowing the Cairo mercenary band to grow. However, the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band has indeed developed quite well in Florida's hands. Their originally damaged strength has gradually recovered, and they'd become the Cairo Mercenary Band's greatest opponent this year. Perhaps this time, the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band will truly be able to regain control of the Valley of Sunshine in Florida's hands. Emily creased her brow in thought as she tirelessly recounted Florida's information. When Emily had finished, Hanshaw said lowly, "He's a strong opponent, all right. This person's heart is sinister, and he even dares to attack his benefactor without mercy. This kind of method is completely different from the Church of Light's principles. It looks like I must be careful. Brian, the Valley of Sunshine is different from other places. It's not bound by any country at all, and whoever has the most power here calls the shots. I know that your strength isn't necessarily weaker than Florida's, but Florida has the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band in his hands. Two fists can't fight four hands. As long as you're in glorious Tanai, I don't think he'll dare make a move with the Cairo Mercenary Band keeping you in check. However, it's best if you don't go out rashly, otherwise he'll find a chance to make a move." Emily was obviously very wary of Florida as she comforted Hanshaw. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Hanshaw's expression was calm as he responded lowly. He paused and said to Emily, "Right, it's been so long, why hasn't Elaine brought Belinda over yet? I've left a drop of blood essence on Belinda, so she won't be able to cause trouble at all. Did something happen along the way?" Emily shook her head with a wry smile when she heard Hanshaw's words. She responded, "I'm also worried. Logically speaking, Elaine should have arrived in Tanai by now. Did something really happen? Forget it, I'll leave for a bit and search along the way," Hanshaw said after thinking for a bit. "No, you've offended Florida. It's best if you don't leave the Valley of Sunshine for now. That person has great power in this area and won't let you off if he knows that you've left the Valley of Sunshine." Emily's expression grew panicked as she stopped Hanshaw. "Nothing will happen. It's not like you don't know my senses. I'll immediately leave once I detect danger. In addition, I've planted a drop of blood essence in Belinda's body. Only I can sense her location within a certain distance. I must make this trip in order to achieve a perfect result for this mission." Hanshaw smiled lightheartedly and didn't take Florida's threat to heart at all as he spoke with great ease. "Since you're so insistent, then I'll go with you," Emily said resolutely to Hanshaw when she saw that she couldn't convince Hanshaw. Shaking his head, Hanshaw declined Emily's suggestion and turned to walk outside. With his back to Emily, he said lowly, "Emily, you should believe in me and not treat me like a child, planning everything for me. This isn't the life I want. If Florida really does make a move, I'll actually look forward to it." Emily had already set off, but she finally sighed when she heard Hanshaw's words. "All right, but you have to be careful. Elaine and Belinda's lives aren't as important to me as you are. You have to remember to protect yourself first." "I will," Hanshaw said. The sky had already gradually darkened when he walked out of the shop. Most of the shops in the Valley of Sunshine had already closed their doors at this time, replaced by the bright neon lights of entertainment. Hanshaw turned a blind eye to the crude and vulgar cries around him as he strode towards the fences leading into the valley. Some procedures were needed to enter the Valley of Sunshine, but nothing was needed to leave. No one questioned Hanshaw when he left, but the Cairo Mercenary Band knight who had come last time looked at Hanshaw with some surprise. He seemed to find it strange that the two beauties beside Hanshaw hadn't left with him. Hanshaw's sensitive senses detected that there were people spying on him when he walked out of the Valley of Sunshine, but he didn't pay too much attention to them. There was no need to think too much. Those spying on him were either the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band or the Cairo Mercenary Band. It wouldn't be difficult for Hanshaw to shake them off, and he had ample confidence in himself. Hanshaw had been walking slowly when he left the valley, but his speed suddenly increased several times. Under the dark sky, Hanshaw's figure was as swift as a shooting star that occasionally streaked across the sky. He'd already traversed several hundred meters in the span of a few breaths, pulling far away from those spying on him. When the feeling of being spied on disappeared, Hanshaw suddenly soared into the air and flew close to the lush silver treetops, heading straight for the road from Valen City. With a single thought, The mysterious power of the demon infant circulated in a bizarre manner. Waves of mysterious power spread out from the demon infant, like ripples in the water, covering the far distance. The demon infant and the blood essence had a mysterious connection. As long as Han Shuo was within 1,000 meters of him, Han Shuo would be able to immediately sense the appearance of the blood essence. As Han Shuo calmed his mind and focused on using the demon infant to sense the blood essence, a strange feeling suddenly leapt into his mind. Han Shuo suddenly sensed the presence of life, some large and some small. The feeling suddenly disappeared after Han Shuo's heart trembled. Startled, Han Shuo once again calmed his mind and focused, carefully comprehending the feeling that had suddenly surged into his mind. Han Shuo then discovered that the life auras belonged to the insects and small beasts that had fallen into hibernation beside him. Although they were somewhat indistinct, Han Shuo was still shocked by this discovery. The demon infant suddenly moved slightly at this moment, and Han Shuo sensed the location of the blood essence in the next moment. The overjoyed Han Shuo abruptly sped up in the air, flying rapidly in the direction of the blood essence. However, when Han Shuo arrived at his destination, he saw Elaine lying beneath a large tree, covered in blood. Her neck was bent unnaturally, as if someone had forcibly broken it. Her body seemed to have been struck by wind-blade magic, as bone-deep wounds tore through her clothes. Her blood mixed with the snow and melted into a pool of blood. It looked like she'd died not long ago. Suddenly, Han Shuo felt a strong sense of danger. Han Shuo was startled and immediately retreated in an attempt to distance himself from Elaine's corpse. Chapter 200. An explosion suddenly sounded from Elaine's corpse. Elaine's body, which had been bleeding profusely, instantly split into pieces of flesh and blood. The violent impact, like a flash flood, shot in all directions in an instant. 2 broken bones and 3 arrows of blood shot straight at Han Shuo's body, carrying with them a terrifying force. In the time it took for sparks to fly off a flint, Han Shuo quickly recited the incantation for the bone shield. A pile of pure white bones formed a square bone shield 1 meter wide and 1.5 meters long, floating in front of Han Shuo. With a few crisp cracks, the white bone shield couldn't withstand the enormous impact and instantly exploded into even more bone fragments. The white bones broke and flew in all directions, like a beautiful ball of fireworks blooming. If it had been anyone else, perhaps they wouldn't have been able to sense the danger from Elaine's corpse and would have been caught off guard by such an attack. However, Han Shuo's keen senses suddenly leaped into his mind. He immediately sensed an inexplicable power lurking in Elaine's corpse, and reacted in time to retreat. Due to the cruel training that Han Shuo had undergone in the true demon realm, the speed at which he condensed and released his mental strength far exceeded that of a normal mage. This was why he was able to chant the white bone shield at a miraculous speed in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint. Retreating a dozen or so meters, the white bone shield shattered into chunks of broken bone amidst the bright white light. Han Shuo had miraculously avoided this obviously premeditated ambush. Looking at Elaine's corpse again, there was nothing but blood and minced flesh on the ground. A strong smell of blood suddenly spread into the air. Han Shuo suddenly felt the suffocating feeling. Han Shuo, who had been panting, immediately knew that something was wrong. At this moment, Han Shuo didn't have time to think. The magical yuan circulating in his limbs and bones had already started to circulate automatically. The magical yuan flowed through his limbs and bones like a trickle, washing away the parts of his body that had been affected by the smell of blood that Han Shuo had just breathed in. Han Shuo, who had been a bit weak in his limbs, could feel the strength in his body again. A vicious plan, a cunning enemy. As the scene played out in Han Shuo's mind, Han Shuo was certain that the drop of blood he'd sealed in Belinda's neck had been tampered with and transferred to Elaine's body. The enemy had then killed Elaine and used her body as bait to set up 2 traps against him. First was a spell similar to the corpse explosion spell. Poison had been injected into Elaine's body, and the blood had mixed with the poison in the instant that Elaine's body exploded, forming a second wave of attacks. Only those fanatical cultists of the Calamity Church, who viewed human life as nothing more than grass, would be able to come up with such a cruel and vicious plan that used the corpse of a dead person. Belinda must have been rescued. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to awaken from the shackles of a drop of blood essence on her own. With these thoughts in mind, Han Sho decided to leave immediately. But just as Han Sho lifted his foot, two footsteps of different heights gradually approached him. Judging from the heavy footsteps and the light footsteps, Han Sho could determine that it was a man and a woman from their weight. His thoughts raced as Han Sho's mind worked furiously, searching for the most suitable method and the best time to deal with the two. However, the best time to make a move often had to be created by oneself. When Han Sho looked left and right, he discovered that there wasn't a very good location and that it was difficult to find the perfect time. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Han Sho, who had been standing ramrod straight, suddenly slumped down. When Han Sho's sharp eyes were covered by his eyelids, Han Sho's heartbeat and breathing became abnormally steady, as if he was unconscious and unconscious. The two slowly approached from afar. Belinda wore her black veil as usual, her bright eyes fixed on Han Sho without blinking. The other person was rather old. His hair and beard were grayish-brown, and his face was densely covered with wrinkles that looked like ravines. He wore a thick gray cotton coat and held a crooked walking stick in his left hand. His grayish-white eyes looked listless. He walked over slowly while sizing up the surroundings. He wasn't just looking at Han Sho. "Belinda, wait!" The old man suddenly spoke when Belinda was 10 meters away from Han Sho. His voice was hoarse and deep. Belinda, who had been staring fixedly at Han Sho, immediately stopped when she heard his shout. She turned to look at the old man in confusion and asked, "Lord Edwin, what is it?" The old man of the Calamity Church, called Edwin's originally grayish-white, listless eyes circled the scene once more before finally focusing on Han Sho. He said in a hoarse voice, "There's no blood on his body and no signs of injury. He likely didn't suffer any injuries from the explosion of that woman's corpse. Judging from the distance, he may have been drugged and fainted, but we still need to be a bit more cautious." "Then what do you think we should do?" Belinda didn't continue to approach Han Sho after hearing his words and even took a few steps back, finally standing shoulder to shoulder with Edwin. "Shoot an arrow at his body. With the strength of my potion, he won't feel anything at all if he's really been drugged and fainted," Edwin said. Han Sho cursed inwardly, and thought to himself that this old fart was indeed sinister and ruthless to think of such a malicious plan. This person gave Han Sho a strong sense of danger, but Han Sho understood from the condition of his body that he wasn't an expert swordsman or knight. He must be an expert mage with a weak body, but with a wondrous technique. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so afraid to approach Han Sho. Belinda laughed lightly and readily agreed when she heard Edwin's instructions. She'd already taken out a bow and arrow and aimed it crookedly at Han Sho from afar. It was obvious that Belinda wasn't an expert marksman. Her hands weren't steady at all, and even when she aimed at Han Sho, the bow trembled. Because they were so close, Han Sho could still feel Belinda's bow and arrow even with his eyes closed. Her arms made light sounds when they came into contact with her armpits. This made Han Sho's heart flutter, and he quickly considered whether or not he should take the gamble. If Han Sho suddenly attacked now, Han Sho didn't have any confidence that he could kill the two of them due to the distance, and the fact that the two of them were already on their guard. Not to mention that Han Sho had no idea what methods Edwin had. It wasn't wise to take such a risk. When Belinda knocked an arrow, Han Sho hardened his heart in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint. He prepared himself to receive the arrow with his strong body. From Belinda and Edwin's conversation, Han Sho understood that they didn't want to kill him immediately. It seemed that they had other plans for him. It was from this point that Han Sho made up his mind. "Do it!" Edwin's voice was low as he urged Belinda. "All right," Belinda replied. Then she drew her bow and shot out an arrow with a whoosh. As Han Sho was on tenterhooks, the arrow landed on the snow on his left arm and didn't even touch his body. It looked like Belinda's archery skills were abnormally bad. She hadn't hit her target at such a close distance. It doesn't matter, we have a lot of time. You'll get the hang of it if you shoot a few more arrows. There was no emotion in Edwin's voice as he spoke slowly. His eyes suddenly lit up as he spoke and focused on Han Shuo's body, as if he wanted to glean some clues from Han Shuo's body. All right, I'll try a few more times. Belinda responded and shot out another 3 arrows. All 3 arrows missed their mark and none landed on Han Shuo's body. Belinda was a bit annoyed as she snorted lightly and took out another arrow. She didn't take much aim this time and shot it directly at Han Shuo. However, the arrow was miraculously accurate even though she hadn't taken any aim at all. It flew straight for Han Shuo's calf. The arrow stabbed into Han Shuo's left calf with a thud. Bright red blood slowly seeped out along his trouser leg. This level of physical pain was no longer a challenge to Han Shuo. His heartbeat and breathing hadn't changed in the slightest as he'd endured the attack from start to finish. His expression was even more wooden, as if he'd truly sunk into a deep, unconscious state. There shouldn't be any problems now. Edwin nodded after a careful look and said lowly. Belinda and Edwin then let go of their guard against Han Shuo and moved closer to Han Shuo. Han Shuo calmed himself and focused his attention, prepared to explode and kill at any moment. He only needed to wait for the old man called Edwin to come close before making a move to kill him first. Although Belinda was also quite frightening, her golem was only a great threat in a group battle. Han Shuo didn't fear her at all in a place like this. Just as Han Shuo was preparing in secret, a few strange noises suddenly sounded from afar. The sounds were getting closer and closer. Han Shuo was inwardly surprised as he lay on the ground, feigning unconsciousness. He didn't know who else was coming. "Chief, that person is here!" A loud shout suddenly sounded from afar as a group of more than 10 people quickly approached amidst the howling cold winds. "He dares leave the Valley of Sunshine, he must be tired of living!" Florida's voice suddenly sounded in Han Shuo's ears, completely out of Han Shuo's expectations. "Chief Florida of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band!" Belinda suddenly cried out in surprise, appearing quite shocked. "I don't care who you two are, hand that kid over to me immediately!" Florida said as arrogantly as ever when he arrived. The eyes of the Calamity Church member called Edwin had regained their calm as he glanced at Florida's group. He first cackled strangely and then said in a raspy voice full of hatred, "So you're Florida. It looks like I was right to come to the Valley of Sunshine this time." An enormous magical ripple suddenly emanated from Edwin's body as he spoke. The aura of dark magic suddenly spread into the surroundings, and 3 huge black palms appeared out of thin air in the direction of Florida and the others, pressing down on them with a ferocious force that seemed to be able to split the heavens and earth. All the trees and rocks in the area exploded in that moment. The towering trees first creaked and then collapsed as if they couldn't withstand the enormous force. The enormous dark magic hand of death was released, and 3 10-meter wide hands of death actually appeared. As the terrifying force came crashing down, 4 mercenaries from the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Group couldn't dodge in time and were directly crushed into 4 pieces of bloody meat paste. "Didn't your grandfather Ferguson teach you that you should maintain the respect of an elderly person?" Edwin's voice was full of cruel laughter as he spoke to Florida. Edwin and Belinda of the Calamity Church were already leaning towards Han Shuo at this moment. If Han Shuo wanted to, he could suddenly make a move and harm Edwin right now. However, from the violent movements, Han Shuo could tell that Edwin seemed to hate Florida even more. He'd attacked and killed as soon as they'd met. His strength was much stronger than Emily's when she also trained in dark magic. On one side was the murderous star of the Calamity Church, and on the other side was the enemy of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. These 2 groups were both targets that Han Shuo needed to deal with. Their sudden fighting would only benefit Han Shuo and not harm him at all. Rather than making a move now, he might as well continue to pretend to be unconscious and watch them fight each other. "Just who are you?" Florida and the remaining experts of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band hastily hid even further away before looking at Edwin in shock and exclaiming in shock, Heh, you may not know me well, but I've been in contact with your grandfather for many years. Perhaps you've heard of the name Edwin. Edwin's voice was still as lukewarm as before as it faintly sounded out. Calamity Church's dark Grand Magus Edwin, so it's you old undying monster. Florida started and then swept his gaze over Han Shuo's body. He waved his hands and said, "Retreat!" The experts of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band obeyed Florida's words and swiftly retreated after his words. It was obvious that they were quite wary of Edwin. "You want to run? It won't be that easy!" Edwin's voice sounded out once again. He quickly chanted a mysterious magic incantation, and two huge death god's scythes appeared on his left and right sides. The gloomy and cold death god's scythes were even larger than Death's hands. The sharp blades danced in the air, slicing through the towering trees along the way like tofu. Only when the death scythes passed through did they suddenly shatter into pieces on the ground. The aura of death emanated from the giant scythe towards Florida and the others. The two tall and strong senior swordsmen on Florida's left and right had no way to resist. They were sliced into a few pieces of meat by the death god's scythe and scattered into bloody chunks on the ground. The terrifying effects of the spell made Florida's party evade even faster. The sudden appearance of such a malefic star had obviously disrupted Florida's plans. Even Han Shuo was startled. The ghastly screams were announcing the loss of life. "Tie him up first, I'll go take care of these people," Edwin said to Belinda when he saw that Florida was running for his life in the direction of the Valley of Sunshine. He then took out a bottle of medicinal powder and handed it to Belinda. "Rub this down his throat. He'll answer anything you ask him when he wakes up. Don't worry, I'll make him pay." Belinda took the bottle and responded firmly. Nodding, Edwin turned around and planned to leave this place to chase after Florida. At this moment, Han Shuo suddenly made his move. The demon's lair edge whistled through the air as Han Shuo furiously circulated his magical yuan, stabbing straight for Edwin's back. Han Shuo had originally planned on waiting a bit longer, but now that he'd witnessed Edwin's strength and discovered that the other was about to leave his attack range, he didn't want to continue watching. He chose to use this last opportunity to finish him off first without hesitation. Edwin was stronger than Han Shuo had imagined. The demon's lair edge was moving at such a fast speed at such a short distance. An instinctive reaction suddenly burst forth just as the demon's lair edge was about to stab into his back. A magic shield flashed like black iron and quickly shielded the part of his back where the demon's lair edge was stabbing at. Blood sprayed out with a splurt. The demon's lair edge pierced through the magic shield that was as thick as black iron and stabbed a few inches into Edwin's back. It was then stopped by an enormous resistance, and couldn't go any further. At the same time, Han Shuo, who'd been lying motionless on the ground, leapt up like a cheetah and flew past Belinda at lightning speed towards Edwin. Purple light burst forth from his left hand as his palm formed a bayonet and mercilessly slashed at Edwin's neck. Chapter 201. With a muffled groan, dark Grand Magus Edwin's body swayed as he flew into the air like a willow catkin. Han Shuo's knife-like palm cut through the air, emitting soft hissing sounds. The demon's lair edge embedded in Edwin's back was pulled by an enormous force and abruptly left his body, falling to the ground in the distance. Blood dripping from Edwin's back, Edwin's expression was savage as he chanted a spell. Another hand of death appeared out of thin air and pressed down on Han Shuo's head like a mountain. An enormous aura enveloped Han Shuo's body, almost making it hard for Han Shuo to breathe. With a thought, the demon's lair edge that had already flown into the distance turned into a streak of light and shot towards Han Shuo's direction. Han Shuo suddenly deployed the art of the demonic ninth heavens. When the hand of death pressed down on his head, Han Shuo pierced through the enormous aura enveloping his body like a sharp arrow and shot towards the direction that Florida and the others had fled in. Edwin had already increased the distance between Han Shuo and Edwin when his second attack missed. The speed at which Edwin had shot into the sky just now was clearly much faster than the Archmage Emily. Han Shuo might have been able to hold his own against Florida with his strength, But as a dark Grand Magus, Edwin's terrifying strength wasn't something that Hans Shaw could handle at the moment. Therefore, he immediately retreated when he saw that the situation wasn't looking good. "Treacherous young man, you must die!" Edwin's voice was raspy as he called out from the air. He actually ignored Belinda and shot straight for Hans Shaw. He couldn't beat Edwin in a fight, but the high speed and agility of the art of the demonic ninth heavens immediately displayed its advantage in running away. He gradually pulled away from Edwin. Suddenly, a group of 10 or so people appeared in front of him. Florida's long hair floated in the air as several experts of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band dashed through the dense forest like lightning. The Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band had left the Valley of Sunshine to target Hans Shaw. Therefore, they'd only dispatched a few experts. How could he have known that his luck would be so bad, encountering the dark great magical tutor Edwin who had a grudge against Florida's grandfather? That was why he ended up in such a miserable state. Fleeing in the same direction, Hans Shaw's speed was obviously faster than Florida's group. Being able to catch up with them halfway was within Hans Shaw's expectations. Chuckling coldly, Hans Shaw approached from behind and used the agility of the art of the demonic ninth heavens to leisurely hang on Florida and the others. As Hans Shaw chanted, bone spear after bone spear shot towards Florida like cold lightning. "Damn it!" Florida heard the whistling sound of bone spears piercing through the air as he turned his head to see 3 bone spears shooting towards his back. He then saw the sinister expression on Hans Shaw's face as he looked at him with a cold smile. He couldn't help but curse out loud. A ball of blinding light emanated from the staff in Florida's hand as the radiant sword slash appeared and shattered the 3 bone spears. But at this moment, the difference between the levitation spell and Hans Shaw's art of the demonic ninth heavens became apparent. Hans Shaw's speed wasn't affected in the slightest after chanting the same spell, but Florida's originally fast-flying speed was reduced by a third. Hans Shaw understood that Edwin was rapidly approaching as the strange sound of the wind drew near. A mocking smile played at the corner of his lips as Hans Shaw slowed down once again and continued to hang behind Florida like a vengeful spirit. He chanted the bone spear spell again and sent out another 3 bone spears. Florida wasn't afraid of Hans Shaw, but he was extremely afraid of Edwin. If Edwin hadn't been chasing after him, Florida would have stopped without hesitation and fought Hans Shaw with the force of a thunderbolt. However, he obviously didn't want to be caught up to by Edwin because of Hans Shaw. Therefore, he could only continue to defend helplessly as his flying speed decreased again and again. "Chief, we'll help you hold him off. You should leave first." At this moment, one of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band experts in front of Florida yelled out loudly and suddenly stopped where they were. They'd all witnessed Edwin's strength just now. If they stayed behind, they might be able to hold off Hans Shaw, but they would be hard-pressed to escape Edwin's murderous hands. It looked like they'd already made up their minds to die when they said these words at this moment. "All right, I'll avenge you." Florida was indeed a vicious and merciless character. Although he couldn't bear to do so, he still decisively agreed to the other suggestions. He glared viciously at Hans Shaw and continued to walk forward without stopping. 2 crossbows suddenly took aim at Hans Shaw. The 2 mercenaries' gazes were so sharp that Hans Shaw felt a bone-piercing sense of danger. 2 whooshing sounds rang out as the 2 crossbow bolts shot towards Hans Shaw with terrifying speed and accuracy that surpassed Hans Shaw's imagination. Hans Shaw, who'd been rushing forward, abruptly retreated, not daring to take another step forward. The divine archers knocked their arrows in this process and aimed them at Hans Shaw. There was a clear difference compared to Belinda's archery just now. Even though Hans Shaw was already in the air, he couldn't escape the threat below him and had no choice but to retreat once again. However, Edwin's figure was already approaching from the distance at this moment. It looked like he'd be here before long. Hans Shaw hesitated for a moment and decided to immediately change directions. It was at this moment that the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries below him suddenly began to panic. A ball of dazzling, milky white sword light exploded out from the middle of them. Trunks, riding on his manticore, swung his sword with a callous expression, forcing the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries to no longer have the energy to deal with Han Shuo. Trunks! Han Shuo was flabbergasted when he saw the abnormalities below him. He couldn't help but cry out in joy as he dived down. Continue to chase after Florida through the air. I'll be in charge of intercepting these traitors below who deserve to die 1,000 times over. We'll continue our discussion when we return to the Valley of Sunshine. The extraordinarily handsome Trunks raised his head and flashed a radiant smile at Han Shuo. He continued to attack the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries on his manticore. Trunks, don't go too far! The Rainbow Sickle mercenary who'd spoken earlier suddenly glared angrily at Trunks. You're going too far! Haha, the old chief was so good to you, but you followed behind that animal Florida without a single question after he took power. You still have the face to say these words to me? Trunks laughed heartily as if he'd heard a funny joke. However, his smile was even colder than the icy night wind, and his tone was filled with bone-deep hatred. Edwin's figure grew closer and closer. Trunks snorted coldly, and raised his head to look at Han Shuo again. He urged, Brian, hurry up and leave this place. It's best if you can take this opportunity to kill Florida. Alright, that old monster behind us is very troublesome. Get out of the way immediately if he comes over, don't come into direct contact with him. Although Han Shuo didn't know why Trunks hated Florida so much, he guessed that it had something to do with the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. It looked like these Rainbow Sickle mercenaries had known Trunks for a long time. This meant that there was some sort of connection between them. It would be too late if he didn't give chase now. Out of trust in Trunks' strength, Han Shuo streaked through the air like lightning and continued in Florida's direction. Not long after Han Shuo left, Edwin, who'd been using the levitation spell, also suddenly flew into the air. Edwin only glanced down and didn't linger after discovering that Florida and Han Shuo weren't here. He followed Han Shuo, looking like he wasn't the slightest bit interested in Trunks and the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band below. Han Shuo had already experienced Florida's methods. Han Shuo wouldn't be able to live in peace until this person died. With the extreme water in the Valley of Sunshine, Han Shuo would need to stay here for a period of time sooner or later. If Florida didn't die then, there would be endless trouble. Therefore, even if he didn't hold a grudge against Phoebe, Han Shuo would still kill Florida. Although Han Shuo's flying technique allowed him to linger for a bit, Han Shuo still slowly caught up to Florida when he circulated his magical yuan to the limit. Florida spat out blood in anger when the bone spear whistled again. He now obviously thought that Han Shuo wanted to take him down with him and die in Edwin's hands. He was so aggrieved that he really wanted to stop and fight to the death with Han Shuo. Just what do you want? None of us will be able to escape when that old monster Edwin catches up. Florida's speed slowed down again after he'd used the radiant sword slash to block Han Shuo's bone spear. He then roared out in exasperation. Heh, I'm happy to die with you today. Han Shuo finally vented all of the pent-up anger he'd been holding back for the past 2 days. He felt a sense of carefree joy in his heart as he roared with laughter. Even if Edwin caught up, Han Shuo was confident that he could use his magical yuan to escape. In addition, with Han Shuo's understanding of an archmage's mental strength, he was certain that Florida wouldn't be able to fly for long, which was why he'd purposefully done this. Man, you're a fucking madman! Florida finally couldn't help but curse loudly after hearing Han Shuo's words. Because Florida and Han Shuo's figures had slowed down at this moment, Edwin's figure had already appeared behind them. His strange cackling also traveled over first. Old dog, hurry up and come over, I'll be waiting for you. Laughing wildly, Han Shuo even had the time to glance back at Edwin and provoke him loudly. You better pray that I don't catch you, or I'll make you regret ever being alive. In the distance, Edwin was enraged by the old dog. The wound on his back seemed to hurt even more. The arrow that Belinda had shot into Han Shuo's calf had long since been pulled out by him. Han Shuo's strong body had taken effect and stopped the bleeding. Apart from some slight pain, it didn't affect Han Shuo's movements at all. When the 3 bone spears shot out again and Florida had no choice but to block them, Han Shaw took the opportunity to cast Dark Mist. It was already night time, and the sky wasn't all that bright apart from the crescent moon. When Dark Mist appeared, the area around Han Shaw and Florida was completely enveloped in pitch-black darkness. Damn it! Florida's magic staff exploded with blinding light, but it could only illuminate the area around him. He was a bit flustered in defending against the bone spears, and his flying speed slowed down even more. Kid, I'll take your life first and let your grandfather repay a bit of the debt he owes me. Edwin had finally arrived, and Han Shaw was like a wisp of smoke, quickly disappearing in the direction of the Valley of Sunshine. All that was left in front of him was Florida, who had just blocked the 3 bone spears. Han Shaw wouldn't be so stupid as to hide his tracks in front of a dark Grand Magus. Even a truly dead person wouldn't be able to hide when this monster's enormous mental strength covered the area. Therefore, Han Shaw could only use his advantage in speed to leave this dangerous area as quickly as possible, leaving Florida to cover his back. When Han Shaw's figure gradually faded, the effects of the dark mist also disappeared. When Florida saw the bright moonlight once again appear in the chilly night sky, he also saw Edwin, who was seething with rage from Han Shaw's 7 orifices and was about to make an example out of him. In the name of the God of Light, bind all darkness and shackle all light! Florida's mind was thrown into chaos when he saw Edwin. He didn't even think as he released a light magic, shackle of light. Rings of light the size of hula hoops sparkled with a holy and beautiful light as they rolled under the bright moonlight, surrounding Edwin in the center. Each ring of light was filled with the pure element of light, and possessed a powerful binding power. This kid has such high attainments in light magic at such a young age. He will become a great thorn in the side of our Calamity Church in the future. It looks like we can't let you leave here alive today. Dark Grand Magus Edwin was unhurried in the face of the restraints of the light rings. His face that had just been filled with rage at Han Shaw actually recovered its calm. Edwin chanted a dark magic spell as he waved his magic staff at the approaching shackles of light. A vast and boundless force seemed to tear through everything as it pulverized the 2 shackles of light that had approached first. Suddenly, the remaining rays of light suddenly strung together. Then, the power of thunder and lightning crackled. Lightning suddenly shot out from each ray of light. The shackle of light that had originally been used to restrain the enemy instantly became a powerful killing move that could destroy everything, sweeping even Edwin into it. Oh, you've got some skill all right. You're able to combine thunder and lightning magic with the shackle of light. A soft exclamation sounded out from Edwin's direction amidst a burst of lightning and blinding light. A dark and glossy magic shield then completely covered Edwin as 3 hands of death appeared out of thin air and grabbed the shackle of light covering his body. They forcefully tore apart the rings of light with ferocious strength. It was as if the bolts of lightning couldn't affect the hands of death at all. Florida spat out a mouthful of fresh blood and then continued to run madly in a panic, as if he didn't want to stay here for even a second longer. This spell, which was a fusion of light and lightning elements, was clearly out of his control. The backlash from the excessive consumption of the spell immediately caused serious damage to his body. However, Edwin had easily broken through such a powerful and miraculous attack. The difference of 1 level was indeed difficult to overcome. Florida knew that he would be hard-pressed to escape death if he stayed a moment longer. Although Edwin had broken through the spell that had consumed all of Florida's strength, it had also taken him a bit of time. When Edwin had used his strength to eliminate all of the residual power of the spell, he discovered that Florida had disappeared once again. Florida's mental strength was greatly exhausted at this time, and his body was on the verge of collapse as he flew. However, the Valley of Sunshine finally appeared in front of him after a long chase. He would be able to enter the Valley of Sunshine with just a bit more effort. No matter how much the Cairo Mercenary Band and Florida schemed against each other, the Cairo Mercenary Band had to abide by the iron rules of the Valley of Sunshine. Therefore, once Florida entered the Valley of Sunshine, anyone who dared to go on a killing spree in Tanai's territory would be attacked by all factions. Add to that the fact that most of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band was in the Valley of Sunshine. Even Edwin wouldn't be able to do anything to Florida once he entered the Valley of Sunshine. Just as he saw the fences of the Valley of Sunshine, Han Shaw's figure also appeared in his line of sight with a cruel smile on his face. He just happened to block Florida's path, obviously not planning on letting him in alive. Chapter 202. If a person made it clear that he wanted to kill you as soon as possible, then if you wanted to live, then the best way was to kill him before he killed you. Han Shu and Florida had been at loggerheads from the start, and the matter of Phoebe had magnified this enmity. Not only had Florida made it clear that he had to kill Han Shu early on, but he'd also made an official move. Han Shu naturally wouldn't resign himself to his fate. It was now the latter half of the night after a day of pursuit. The bright moon hung high in the sky, looking down on everything below like a giant, icy eye. Strong, frosty winds blew across the towering ancient trees, scattering the thick ice and snow on them in all directions. Rustling sounds rang out incessantly. Han Shu stood in the air with the demon's lair edge in his right hand. His expression was callous, and his gaze was resolute and emotionless. He was like a towering mountain, towering over Florida's path of hope. Florida only had hope of survival if he could get past Han Shu. If you step aside now, I promise that I won't make an enemy out of you in the future. Florida's mental strength had been greatly depleted as he'd fled due to the backlash of magic. His injuries were now quite severe, and his strength was much weaker than before. He looked at Han Shu with a bit of helplessness. Han Shu's laughter was as cold as an icy cavern as he looked deeply at Florida and shook his head. I'm sorry, I think that your promise will be more effective if you die. Florida knew that there was no way out after these words were spoken. His face hardened and he said darkly, My grandfather is Grand Magus Ferguson of the Church of Light. There's no benefit in making an enemy out of me. Even if you can kill me today, my grandfather won't let you go in the future. Florida was obviously putting on a brave front when he said these words. With his strength, not only did he not frighten Han Shu by using his grandfather's name to threaten Han Shu, but it also confirmed that Han Shu's strength was indeed much weaker than before. Otherwise, Han Shu wouldn't have wasted time bickering with Han Shu. If I don't kill you today, I'll have to face both your grandfather and you. But if you die, I'll only have to face your grandfather. So, you should just die. Han Shu said coldly, and immediately began to kill. A pile of pure white bones appeared under the bright moonlight as Han Shu chanted. They emitted a cold white light, and quickly assembled to form a bone cage 3 meters wide and 4 meters tall, rapidly tightening around Florida. As soon as the bone prison was completed, the emotionless Han Shu suddenly flew out and shot towards Florida like a bolt of lightning. Regardless of whether or not Florida's strength had been greatly reduced, he was still a light archmage after all, and he'd also trained in thunder magic. As long as Florida entered Tanai, the Cairo mercenary band had the duty to interfere. However, now that Han Shu and Florida were fighting outside the valley, with Harris's hatred for the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band, he probably wanted nothing more than for Florida to be killed by Han Shu. Pausing for a moment, Han Shu saw that Florida was about to charge into the Valley of Sunshine and that Edwin had reappeared behind him. Han Shu immediately circulated his magical yuan to the limit without hesitation and transformed into a streak of light smoke in the air, shooting straight for Florida. Suddenly, a fire dragon soared into the air and exploded out of the Valley of Sunshine's fences, abruptly sweeping towards Han Shu. Han Shu had been planning on killing Edwin when he couldn't help but change directions and dodge. He first used the dark mist to move stealthily, and then summoned a zombie as a target to unleash the fury of the fire dragon. Han Shu looked down from within the dark mist and discovered that there was an additional fire mage at the fences in front of the Valley of Sunshine's gates. A group of knights on warhorses and wearing the uniforms of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band were also quickly approaching. Damn it, why are they here? Harris growled lowly from the fences. Chief, are you all right? The Rainbow Sickle mercenary band immediately surrounded Florida when they arrived and asked nervously. Florida, still in a state of shock, finally heaved a great sigh of relief when he saw that his people had appeared. He turned his head and pointed viciously at Han Shuo, saying, "Kill him!" Florida's body went limp as soon as he finished speaking, and he actually fainted. It looked like the repeated blows he'd taken along the way had taken a heavy toll on his body. The appearance of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band experts made Han Shuo understand that he no longer had a chance to kill Florida. However, when he saw that Florida had fainted, Han Shuo understood that although Florida hadn't died this time, he was on the verge of losing half his life. It was unlikely that he'd be able to recover in a short amount of time. Han Shuo, who'd been outside the valley, hadn't waited for the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band to make a move, as he'd already shot towards Tanai from above, landing a few meters behind Harris. According to the rules of the Valley of Sunshine, even if you had the ability to fly through the air, you still couldn't use this method to travel between Tanai and the outside of the valley. However, Harris and the others of the Cairo mercenary band had clearly seen Han Shuo and Florida's fight. The enemy of an enemy was a friend, so Harris not only forgave Han Shuo's actions with great magnanimity, he also immediately waved his hands and led the Cairo mercenary band to stand in front of Han Shuo. "I'm sorry, but he's already entered the valley." Edwin came from the Calamity Church and was a dark Grand Magus. He was a respected expert even in the entirety of the Profound Continent. If such a character hadn't been killed immediately, the troubles that would follow would be unimaginable. Han Shuo was currently having a terrible headache and wanted to immediately leave the Valley of Sunshine and use the transportation matrix to return to the Cemetery of Death. The night had unknowingly come to an end. When Han Shuo arrived at the Dark Mantle Stronghold, Emily was still drowsy. When she saw Han Shuo appear in front of her, her somewhat dazed eyes gradually cleared up and she said joyfully, "It's good that you're all right. Did you see Trunks?" Nodding, Han Shuo said in surprise. "How did you know Trunks was coming? The Dark Mantle still has some eyes and ears in Tanai. Trunks entered the valley alone not long after you left. When I learned that he entered the valley and understood that the two of you were very close, I discussed your matters with him. When he learned that Florida wanted to deal with you, he immediately left without another word and flew in the direction of Valen City. Because I needed to stay here and wait for news from above, I didn't go with him," Emily explained. "Elaine's dead, and I was almost killed." Han Shuo sighed and said to Emily after sitting down. Hearing that Elaine had died, Emily's beautiful face suddenly revealed a hurt expression. She became completely silent and only sighed after a while, saying softly, "Although Sister Elaine doesn't know martial arts, she's very good at doing things. She's opened a small inn in Valen City and provided the organization with a lot of valuable information. I've helped her a lot, but we've caused her death this time." If Han Shuo and Emily hadn't appeared, and if they hadn't been in a hurry to leave Belinda to Elaine's care, Elaine wouldn't have been killed. However, Han Shuo didn't have a deep relationship with Elaine, so he didn't feel too much grief. When he saw the hurt expression on Emily's face, he went over and patted Emily's shoulder, speaking some words of comfort. Emily's mood improved under Han Shuo's low words of comfort. She then remembered the matter at hand and said to Han Shuo, "Just what happened?" When Han Shuo recounted everything that had happened in detail to Emily, the many perilous encounters along the way caused Emily's heart to tremble with fear. She was happy for Han Shuo's escape, but worried for the danger that he was in. Emily was still a bit shaken even after Han Shuo had finished. She reached out to lift up Han Shuo's trousers and looked at the wound that had stopped bleeding. She said with heartache, "Don't take such risks in the future. If Belinda's arrow hadn't been in this direction, then wouldn't you have been in great danger? Don't worry, if the direction wasn't right, I naturally wouldn't have waited for death. I would have immediately turned around and fled as far as I could." Chapter 203. The sky was already completely bright, and the air had become increasingly cool. The millstone-sized sun was slowly rising. The magnificent sunrise rose from the inky blue clouds, sparkling with a bright and gentle red light as it tore through the clouds covering the sky. On the streets in the early morning, Tanai's glorious sunrise was in groups of 2s and 3s, yawning with sleepy expressions as they walked out of the brothels in the shadows of the streets. It looked like they'd exerted quite a bit of effort on the women last night. There really are a lot of tasteless fellows out there. Emily wasn't in a good mood as she coldly glanced at the disheveled man walking out of the alleyway and said with a face full of disgust. Han Shuo didn't feel tired at all after a night of chasing. He looked around with interest and didn't respond. Oh, right, Phoebe came looking for you last night. I said you had some business and went out for a bit. Emily tightened the coat around her chest and turned her head to speak to Han Shuo. She didn't say anything? Han Shuo was slightly taken aback as he remembered what Phoebe had gone to do and asked. No, I don't think she had anything to say to me, Emily replied. She paused and suddenly leaned closer to Han Shuo with a bit of an air of gossip. She lowered her voice and said, Did you do that to her? Shaking his head, Han Shuo put on a serious face and said righteously, How could that be? We've only known each other for a few months. Am I that impatient? PSK, didn't you violate me on the first day you met me? And you even used violent methods. You shameless little scoundrel! Emily was quite disdainful of Han Shuo's response and snorted lightly. Han Shuo couldn't help but laugh when he heard her say this. He didn't feel awkward and instead opened his mouth to quibble. Our situation was a bit special back then. Also, you were a bit too tempting. How could I resist your temptation when I was young and full of vigor? Scoundrel, you only know how to speak nonsense. Emily was infuriated, but she was satisfied with Han Shuo's answer, so she didn't pursue the matter any further. Seeing the joy on Emily's face, Han Shuo knew that she wasn't actually angry. He suddenly thought of a question and asked Emily, Oh right, how did the Cairo mercenary band know about that place? Did they know that the shop was controlled by the Dark Mantle? Contrary to Han Shuo's expectations, Emily actually nodded her head in admission. Seeing Han Shuo's astonished expression, she finally opened her mouth to explain. The Valley of Sunshine is different from any other city in the Empire. The ones in charge here are the Cairo mercenary band. Add to that the fact that this place is limited, they'll interrogate anyone who enters. It's unrealistic to want to maintain privacy here. However, even though the Cairo mercenary band knows that we're part of the Dark Mantle, they won't interfere with our operations. This is because our Dark Mantle targets only people or matters that harm the Lancelot Empire. We won't purposely make things difficult for them. Brian! At this moment, Han Shuo and Emily heard Trunk's voice as they walked towards the Cairo mercenary band. They turned their heads and discovered that Trunks had appeared on the back of his manticore from the direction of the valley. There were still some indistinct traces of blood on Trunks and the manticore. The experts of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band that had fallen behind the man and beast had angry expressions on their faces. It looked like they'd suffered a bit. His sharp gaze roamed over Trunks' body, but Han Shuo didn't discover any traces of damage to his clothes. It looked like the blood on him and the manticore had come from the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band behind them. Are you all right? Han Shuo asked with a slight smile when Trunks arrived on his manticore. They're just a few useless traitors, how could they have hurt me? Right, how are things on your side? Did you take care of that despicable scum Florida? Trunks first responded confidently, and then stared fixedly at Han Shuo. Spreading out his hands and making a helpless expression, Han Shuo sighed. He was rescued when he reached the entrance. However, I think that it'll take at least a month or two for Florida to recover from all his injuries. Haha, that's good. I came to the Valley of Sunshine this time to take his life. It looks like you've already done most of the work for me. I thank you in advance. Trunks laughed long and hard as he looked at the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band members behind him. Traitors, go back and tell Florida that I, Trunks, have returned. I must avenge Annie this time, he will die by my hands. The Rainbow Sickle mercenaries all had looks of hatred on their faces when they heard this, but they seemed to know that Trunks wasn't to be trifled with. They only snorted coldly and walked around Han Shaw, Trunks, and the other two, heading in another direction. Trunks, why have you come to the Valley of Sunshine? Also, what enmity do you have with Florida? Han Shu finally couldn't help but ask at this moment. The merchants on the streets of the town eye of the Sunshine Valley had already begun to rise, and the originally deserted streets had become a bit more lively. Trunks looked left and right, his expression a bit downcast as he said, "This isn't the place to talk. Let's find a place to talk and I'll tell you in detail." "All right." Han Shu nodded in agreement. "Wait a bit, Lorton of the Cairo Mercenary Band has an appointment with us. Why don't you guys talk in detail after we return?" Emily couldn't help but remind Han Shu when she saw that Han Shu and Trunks seemed to want to immediately find a quiet place to talk. Han Shu finally reacted after hearing her words and said apologetically to Trunks, "Lorton of the Cairo Mercenary Band sent someone to meet us early in the morning. He wants us to make a trip to the Cairo Mercenary Band. Why don't we talk in a bit?" Nodding in understanding, Trunks walked shoulder to shoulder with Han Shu and said confidently, "Let's go. I'm also looking for Lorton. Let's go together." "You know him?" Han Shu started and asked Trunks in surprise. "Of course, I also spent some time in the Valley of Sunshine a few years ago. I'm familiar with many of the people here." Trunks responded matter-of-factly. Emily revealed a startled expression when she heard these words and looked at Trunks thoughtfully. There were no shops or streets in the depths of Tanai, only some towering cliffs and some towering ancient trees that covered the sky. Trunks seemed to be quite familiar with this place as he led Han Shu and Emily inside. The terrain in the depths of the Valley of Sunshine is extremely precipitous. However, after passing through a narrow cliff, there's a large piece of flat land. That place has always been the residence of the strongest powers in the Valley of Sunshine. The Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band was stationed there a few years ago. If it wasn't for Florida's sinister plot to assassinate the old chief, the Cairo Mercenary Band would still be in another place. Trunks walked in and introduced the place to Han Shu and Emily. There was a Cairo Mercenary Band standing guard every few meters as they walked in. However, the distance between them was a bit far and the three weren't afraid of being overheard by others. "Right, Trunks, what kind of grudge do you have with Florida?" Han Shu couldn't help but ask when he saw that it was quiet enough. "Actually, I used to be a member of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. I was still a senior swordsman, and had always been taken care of by the old chief. The old chief's daughter, Annie, treated you like an older brother. My days in the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band were very comfortable. That was until Florida appeared. The young Florida had a dazzling radiance. He received special treatment when he joined the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. Not only did the old leader think highly of him, even Annie admired him a lot. I also had a good relationship with him. However, Florida's goal in coming to the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band was to completely take control of it. Even though the old chief had already entrusted Annie to him, he felt that the old chief had lived for too long. In the end, he colluded with bandits and leaked our whereabouts, causing the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band to suffer heavy losses. The old chief died in the bandits' encirclement, and Annie also went missing. It's likely that she's met with misfortune. I was lucky enough to escape and saw Florida talking to the bandit leader. Only then did I understand everything. From then on, I made up my mind to get rid of Florida sooner or later. It was a pity that after Florida took control of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band, he also invited a force from the Church of Light and took control of the situation in an extremely short amount of time, grasping the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band in his hands. Back then, I only had the strength of a senior swordsman, and led some of the remaining soldiers loyal to the old chief in an attempt to assassinate Florida. In the end, we were routed and fled in panic. Many close friends died tragically in that battle. It was with the determination to take revenge that I snuck into the dark forest to train myself. I waited for 3 years and knew that the curtains to the next competition for the strongest powers in the Valley of Sunshine would soon open. I knew that Florida, unwilling to be left out, would surely compete with the Cairo Mercenary Band. I thought this was an opportunity, and so I came back. Trunks calmly recounted the events of the past. Trunks' expression was cold from beginning to end, as if he was narrating something that had nothing to do with him. However, the listening Han Shu and Emily could feel the boundless hatred buried deep within Trunks' heart from the events themselves. When Trunks finished, Han Shu looked deeply at Trunks and revealed a radiant smile. It looks like we can join forces again. I think Florida will die without a doubt this time. Of course, he will, Trunks said confidently, and then looked at Emily with interest, then looked at Han Shu. He asked with a strange expression, "What's going on with you two? If I remember correctly, you captured this lady alive back then. Why are you two together now?" Chuckling loudly, Han Shu winked at Trunks and said, "Sometimes it's very easy for enemies to become friends, especially between men and women." "I understand, haha." Trunks laughed involuntarily and nodded in understanding. "You two crazy fellows." Emily was a bit embarrassed by their words. She rolled her eyes at them and snorted angrily. As they chatted and laughed, they passed through the narrow cliff and arrived at a wide, flat area. This area was mainly made of dark green rocks, piled up into many tall buildings. These buildings weren't particularly exquisite or beautiful, but were completely practical. They looked thick and sturdy, as if they were very resistant to attacks. On the way to those buildings, there was a spacious training field. Dozens of muscular mercenaries were training with all kinds of weapons. In a dense forest not far away, several mages were casting magic, and some people were meditating even further away. This place is large enough and the buildings are sturdy enough. Because there's only one natural stronghold that leads here, it's very safe. It's been the last line of defense in the Valley of Sunshine for many years. Trunks explained to Han Shu and Emily as they walked. "Eh? Trunks, why are you back?" Harris of the Cairo mercenary band was standing at the entrance of the square in high spirits, as if he'd been waiting for Han Shu and the others. He was obviously very surprised when he saw Trunks and couldn't help but exclaim softly, "Harris, it's been a long time since I've seen you. You look even more sturdy than before. But Florida has been doing quite well these past few years. It looks like you haven't taken your revenge yet." Trunks had a hint of ridicule on his face as he spoke to Harris from afar. "Humph, didn't you also run away with serious injuries? What right do you have to talk to me?" Harris's expression was stiff as he shouted angrily, "Forget it, I have nothing to say to you. Let's go, take me to see Lorton." Trunks frowned and curled his lips, urging Harris to lead the way. After crossing the square, Harris brought the three of them to a huge building. Loud rumbling sounds came from the building in the distance. When Han Shu and the other two walked in, they couldn't help but be astonished by the scene in front of them. A bald, burly man with a height of more than 2 meters had half of his body exposed. He was only wearing a pair of shorts. The muscles on his body bulged and were as hard as iron and stone. The blue veins all over his body were pulsating, full of terrifying explosive power. There was a small mountain of dark green rock on his back. The rock was 3 times the size of his body, and he quickly retreated with the rock on his back. His body and the rock crashed into a stone pillar so thick that it would take 3 people to wrap their arms around it, making a deafening rumbling sound. Sweat trickled down his body, flowing along the lines of his muscles. His dark skin shone with a healthy luster, and his bald head, without a single strand of hair, glistened with a glossy sheen. Amidst the rumbling sounds of collisions, the burly man's body trembled repeatedly. The wide stone pillar behind him made ka-cha-bang sounds, and the entire building seemed to be trembling under the violent collisions, making people worry that the building would collapse at any moment. When the 3 of them arrived, he slammed against the wall 5 times in a row before finally throwing the boulder on his body to the side with a loud rumble. The entire ground trembled as if there was an earthquake, and a loud rumbling reverberated throughout the building. When Han Shu and the other 2 arrived, the burly man slammed into the pillar 5 times before finally throwing the rock on his back to the side. The entire ground trembled as if there was an earthquake, and the loud rumbling sounds lingered in the building. Han Shuo's heart couldn't help but tremble as he knew that the strength of this person's physical body had already reached an astonishing level. Trunks, why have you come back? The burly man's eyes shone with a strange light as he looked at Trunks in astonishment. Lorton, it's been a few years since we've seen each other. It looks like your physical body has already been tempered to the extreme. You could already go berserk twice before, and it looks like you've gone up another level now. I wonder if you can go berserk thrice and reach the legendary 3 strong levels of the berserkers? Trunks revealed an expression of interest as he stared at Lorton. Revealing a strange smile, Lorton didn't respond to Trunks' question and focused his attention on Han Shuo, saying, You're the one who almost killed Florida? Nodding, Han Shuo said with a smile. Indeed. What instructions do you have for me, Chief Lorton? I'd like to discuss a business deal with you, but you'll have to take a punch from me first. Let me measure your strength and see if you're worth it for me to hand over that shop to you. Lorton laughed loudly as his fan-sized fist smashed towards Han Shuo's head with a forceful, domineering aura. Han Shuo was slightly startled, and then discovered that the punch had already arrived in front of him. The berserk power contained within made Han Shuo pale with fright. What surprised Han Shuo even more was that this surge of power sealed off all of Han Shuo's paths of retreat, giving him no chance of dodging at all. Han Shuo's face was aghast as he immediately focused all of his attention and circulated his magical yuan to the limit, planning on taking this punch head-on. Chapter 204. The iron fist that could split mountains and split rocks came crashing down, the ferocious force causing the air to crackle. The boundless dominance that was like a torrential river made all the pores on Han Shuo's skin stand on end. Han Shuo took a deep breath and circulated his magical yuan to his right hand. When he activated his magical yuan to the limit, Han Shuo's right hand actually turned the color of black jade. Pure white bones were embedded in his jade-like right hand, sparkling with a faint light. A cloud of purple magical energy curled around the center of his right palm, giving off the appearance of a raging flame. Trunks and Emily, who'd been shocked out of their wits and about to intervene, froze in place and shut their mouths when they saw Han Shuo's right hand suddenly change. When Han Shuo's right hand changed, Han Shuo, who'd been in a defensive position, suddenly darted out with lightning speed. He then pulled his right hand back and a bolt of purple lightning suddenly appeared, violently striking Lorton's fist. An ear-splitting boom rang out, even louder than when Lorton had struck the pillar with the boulder. The entire hall reverberated with this enormous sound. A force that could topple mountains and overturn the seas suddenly surged madly from his right hand into Han Shuo's body. The strength of this force was beyond Han Shuo's imagination. If it wasn't for the fact that Han Shuo's body was also abnormally tough, Han Shuo's right fist would have exploded into pieces upon contact. Even so, Han Shuo's body still couldn't help but fly backwards and fall towards the door of the hall. He crashed into the dark green rock with a crack, his body falling limply to the ground. Chief Lorton of the Cairo mercenary band didn't move an inch with his rock-solid body, but an icy aura spread from his fist to his entire body, causing the trickling sweat on his body to instantly turn into translucent beads of sweat. White smoke quickly rose from his body as the cold aura enveloped him. Are you all right? Emily moved quickly and arrived in front of Han Shuo in the blink of an eye. She stretched out her hand to help Han Shuo up and asked worriedly. His right fist was numb all the way to his shoulder, and it was still trembling slightly. Han Shuo panted heavily, his heart filled with shock. He was shocked by Lorton's strength. Lorton, it looks like your strength has definitely improved. Don't think that I can't see through you just because you've held back. Perhaps you've already achieved the power of 3 berserk transformations. Trunks' eyes sparkled as he stared at Lorton's body. Han Shuo, who was about to console Emily, was even more shocked when he heard Trunks' words. From Trunks' words, Han Shuo knew that the violent punch just now hadn't been Lorton's true strength. Just based on the tyrannical strength of the punch just now, Han Shuo was sure that Lorton wasn't inferior to an Earth Knight or sword master like Clark Phoebe. This wasn't even his true strength. If Lorton had exploded with his full strength, it would have been even more shocking. No wonder he was able to take the position of chief of the Cairo mercenary band and control the Order of the Valley of Sunshine. Crunching sounds rang out from Lorton's frozen body. The sweat that had been frozen into beads of ice rolled off his body and onto the ground like sparkling pearls, shattering into ice shards when they collided with the stone floor. He couldn't help but shiver as he sneezed loudly. He then put on a fur cloak and wrapped it around his sturdy body. Only then did he look at Han Shu in astonishment. What technique is this? I can't feel any fighting aura or magic, so why does it have the same power as a combination of fighting aura and magic? I also can't feel any undulations of fighting aura or magic on your body, but your strength isn't inferior to a sword master who's trained in fighting aura. There's nothing to be surprised about. Han Shu shrugged and responded with a smile. Us berserkers have a special training method that focuses on the physical body. You're not a berserker, so how can you be like this? This is very strange. Lorton shook his head in puzzlement and responded. All right, I don't think you've called us over to interrogate us about these things, right? Han Shu calmly walked forward and sat down on a stone chair not far from Lorton. He even called Trunks and Emily over. After experiencing the exchange just now, Han Shu understood that Lorton's strength was likely stronger than his. However, the Cairo mercenary band's current enemy was the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band that was most likely to threaten their position. Lorton definitely wouldn't harm them if he called them over, so Han Shu was quite relaxed. Emily and Trunks also walked casually to Han Shu's side when they saw that Han Shu was so relaxed. They pulled over a stone chair and sat down. Harris, how's Florida's condition after returning to the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band? Lorton actually revealed a look of praise when he saw Han Shu and the other's casualness. He turned his head to look at Harris and asked. After entering the valley this morning, Florida suddenly fainted in front of Tanai's door and was then brought back to the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. According to our observations, Florida hasn't woken up yet, so we don't know what his current condition is. Harris displayed the proper respect when facing Lorton and quickly responded to Lorton's question. Nodding, Lorton rubbed his shiny bald head, seeming to ponder something. After a while, Lorton looked at Han Shu and said in a loud voice, Your strength isn't bad. I'd originally hoped that you'd consider joining our Cairo mercenary band, but since you know Trunks, you probably won't be willing to join us. I'm well aware of Florida's strength. I tested you just now, and I think it's impossible for you to heavily injure him with your strength alone. Not to mention that he has some experts from the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band with him. Can you tell me what's going on? An enemy helped me. Edwin, who came in this morning, is an enemy of Florida's grandpa. Florida ran into Edwin on the way, and the two of them fought in the end. I just happened to take advantage of the situation. Han Shu answered honestly. There was nothing to hide about this matter now that the facts were laid out in front of him. Edwin, the Calamity Church's Dark Grand Magus Edwin. That old monster has entered the valley? Lorton was startled and turned to look at Harris. It should be him. There's also a masked woman who entered the valley after a while and is currently with him. Harris nodded and responded to Lorton. This person is very difficult to deal with. Is he your enemy? Lorton rubbed his shiny bald head again, appearing a bit troubled. Lorton, I've never heard of you being afraid of anyone in all these years. Don't tell me that you're afraid of an old man? It looks like although your strength has increased, your courage has shrunk. Trunks seemed to know Lorton's habit when he saw him rub his head and couldn't help but mock him. I'm not afraid of him, I'm just afraid of the Calamity Church behind him. This is the strongest evil cult on the Profound Continent. They never follow the rules or reason when they do things, and their power is enormous. Once provoked, it'll be a battle to the death. I'm afraid that any country on the continent would be very wary of them, not to mention our Valley of Sunshine. Lorton rubbed his head and said in annoyance. The Calamity Church was the calamity and nightmare of the entire continent. They held some unreasonable and crazy obsessions and used their power to destroy all people or countries that didn't match their wishes. Even the Lancelot Empire treated the Calamity Church as if they were facing a great enemy, not to mention a large mercenary band. Just from this point, it could be seen that the Calamity Church was indeed very frightening. Edwin is my enemy, and also Florida's enemy. Now that he's arrived in town, I think he'll definitely make a move. Han Sho didn't have any expression on his face as he spoke indifferently. I've heard that Miss Phoebe of Buzd is helping you purchase a shop. That shop is in a forbidden area in town. It's said that it's been cursed by an evil god. Anyone who takes over that shop will have their blood sucked dry and die. Do you really want that shop? Lorreton didn't speak about Edwin and instead brought up this matter with interest. That's right, I've never believed in the curse of an evil god. I hope Chief Lorreton can sell that shop to me? Han Shu admitted frankly and said to Lorreton, Brian, why would you want that shop? I've heard a bit about that place. Many people died there when the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band was in power. We even went in to investigate, but didn't find anything. It's an ominous place, don't take the risk. Trunks was quite surprised when he heard of this matter and turned back with a frown to persuade Han Shu. Emily was also taken aback and turned to look at Han Shu. She exclaimed, No, don't take the risk. I've also heard of that place. There are some unbelievable curses in there. You can't take that place. There are still a few empty shops in town. I just want to know, why have you set your eyes on that one? Lorreton obviously didn't care about Han Shu's death. He only cared about Han Shu's intentions, so he asked about Han Shu's intentions. I can't say anything about this, but I hope you can give that shop to me. I'll pay you a reasonable price. Han Shu understood from Lorreton's words that Phoebe hadn't succeeded yesterday. Lorreton looked like a brawny, simple-minded man, but Han Shu knew that this person wasn't as simple as he appeared. Otherwise, he would have already sold the cursed land to Phoebe without a care in the world. Of course, this is your private matter and I have no right to interfere. However, I'm the one in charge of Tanai's shop, so I have the right not to sell it to you. Lorreton laughed heartily with a confident expression. Taking a deep breath, Han Shu said, All right, I won't force you since you don't want to sell it. If there's nothing else, I think we can leave now. It looks like there's nothing worth staying in the Valley of Sunshine. We should leave. Perhaps you really do have to leave, but Trunks should stay. Heh, isn't that right, Trunks? Lorreton said with a calm expression as he gazed at Trunks. Trunks snorted coldly and glared angrily at Lorreton. It was obvious that Lorreton had hit the nail on the head. Han Shu was determined to obtain the place of extreme water and the place of extreme een. Han Shu had only pretended to leave because he wanted to haggle with Lorreton. Who would have thought that Lorreton would seem to understand something and actually latch on to Trunks' weakness? Lorreton had observed Han Shu and Trunks' expressions from the moment he'd entered and was certain that the two had a close relationship. He'd brought up the matter of the shop as a bargaining chip when he'd first punched out, causing Han Shu to forcefully exchange blows with him. This made Lorreton understand that Han Shu really did care a great deal about the shop. I've said from the start that I want to discuss a business deal with you. I've already tested your strength just now, and you do indeed have the qualifications to sit down and talk with me. Now that Florida is here, this matter will be a bit easier. This is a matter that benefits both sides. Are you interested? Lorreton had an expression that said he wasn't afraid that Han Shu wouldn't agree as he chuckled. Speak, what business deal? Han Shu lay down lazily in his chair and flicked a glance at Lorreton, speaking faintly. It's very simple. You guys continue with your business, which is to kill Florida. Our Cairo mercenary band will be responsible for providing information, and we can guarantee that the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band won't mobilize a large force to deal with you. After this is done, you'll get the shop for free, Trunks will have his revenge, and we'll have one less threat. Isn't this a happy ending for everyone? Lorreton's proposal was something that Han Shu couldn't refuse. Looking at it left and right, it was a win-win situation for all three parties. However, Han Sho didn't immediately agree. He was silent for a while and suddenly said, "You guys also need to help us deal with Edwin. Otherwise, our safety won't be guaranteed with this person around. Friend, don't ask for too much. Actually, if we go find Edwin, it might be better to work with him." Lorreton shook his head and declined with a darkened face. "All right then, go work with Edwin." Han Shaw spread out his hands with a nonchalant expression. The Calamity Church wasn't a benevolent bunch. Anyone who worked with them had to be careful of playing with fire, especially Edwin, who was a dark Grand Magus. If Lorreton worked with him, then the situation would likely be out of his control. In addition, the Calamity Church had a notorious record on the continent that angered even the gods. If the Cairo mercenary band worked with Edwin, then it would be a fatal blow to their mercenary band's reputation once this matter was revealed. At that time, all the merchants in Tanai would be infuriated, and their transcendent position in the Valley of Sunshine would be severely challenged. Han Shaw had seen this point and thus said this. "We can't help you deal with Edwin. It's unwise to offend him for Florida's matter, but we can use our advantage in Tanai to provide you with information about Edwin's movements. No matter where he wants to go, we'll inform you in advance. This way, your safety will be greatly increased. This is also the limit of what we can do. Otherwise, we really can't discuss business." Lorreton's face was dark as he spoke slowly. "All right, then this matter is settled." Han Sho understood that this was the greatest concession Lorreton could make. The threat of the Calamity Church was too great, and the Cairo mercenary band naturally wasn't willing to become enemies with them unless it was absolutely necessary. "I'm very happy to work with you. If you're willing, you can stay for lunch before leaving." Lorreton seemed to be in a good mood when he saw that the matter had been settled and suggested with a hearty laugh, "No, we still have matters to discuss." Han Sho declined politely and then walked out with Emily, Trunks, and the other two. "Brian, are you very familiar with Miss Phoebe of the Bus Merchant Guild?" Trunks' expression was a bit odd on the way back as he suddenly stopped in a secluded area and looked at Han Sho. Nodding, Han Sho said, "That's right, we're very close. She's my girlfriend, what about it?" A strange luster appeared on Trunks' handsome face under the sunlight as he looked deeply at Han Sho. "Brian, you see, the Valley of Sunshine is a wondrous place. As long as you have the ability, you can establish your own power. If we can develop with the Valley of Sunshine as the center, we'll be able to have our own power. You have Miss Phoebe as a friend and will be able to obtain enough gold coins. I have some experienced mercenaries in my hands right now. We can completely use these resources to form our own mercenary band and establish a power that is in our own hands. As long as we have great power in our hands, we'll be able to obtain even more things and won't have to constantly be restrained by others." Actually, with Lorreton's own strength, he wasn't afraid of that old monster Edwin at all. Add on Tanai and the Cairo mercenary band, it wouldn't be too difficult for Lorreton to kill Edwin. He was only afraid of the Calamity Church behind Edwin. He was so wary of Florida not only because of Florida's own strength, but also because of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band in his hands. After all, one person's strength is unable to contend against a large power. As long as we work hard and combine our current advantages, along with the special place like the Valley of Sunshine, we can completely establish our own power. This way, no matter where we go in the future, our words will have different weight when we have this power in our hands. These words were filled with hot-bloodedness, as they bombarded Han Sho's mind like a bucket of wisdom. In that instant, Han Sho suddenly understood something. A demonic heart that wasn't willing to be ordinary to begin with suddenly beat more and more violently. "You're saying that the two of us should work hard and establish our own power?" Han Sho's voice sounded a bit agitated, greatly different from his usual indifference. Nodding his head heavily, Trunks continued, "That's right. A group of brothers from the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band have received my message and are currently stationed in the mountain ranges around the Valley of Sunshine. However, although my brothers have extraordinary strength, they've been a bit down because they've lost the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band as their home. However, their strength and quality are undeniably good. I've hunted down all kinds of magical beast cores in the dark forest these past few years and greedily plundered some wealth. I've accumulated a bit, but it's still a bit difficult to maintain the operations of a large mercenary band. Since you have a close relationship with Miss Phoebe, I can use my current connections to form a mercenary band if I can obtain a sum of gold coins. When the mercenary band reaches a certain scale and has its own reputation, not only will we not need to invest additional gold coins, but we can also obtain large amounts of gold coins through various missions and methods to slowly strengthen our power. If our mercenary band can be like the Cairo mercenary band and maintain order in the Valley of Sunshine, we can obtain hundreds of thousands of gold coins and taxes every year by protecting the interests of merchants. With such a power in our hands, our status will be completely different in front of any person or country. Brian, Trunk's suggestion isn't bad. The organization won't care about your other identity. The stronger your other identity is, the more useful you'll be to the organization. Then, your speed of advancement will be even faster. This is mutually reinforcing. If you make it to a certain scale, perhaps the higher-ups will send people to help you and give you even more privileges. Emily was also a woman full of ambition. Her expression was joyful when she heard this, and her voice was also a bit excited as she spoke to Han Shuo. Come, let's go back and discuss this properly. Han Shuo had already made up his mind and spoke lowly with a strange smile on his face. Chapter 205. In the hotel that Han Shuo and Phoebe had booked in the Valley of Sunshine, Han Shuo, Phoebe, Emily, and Trunks sat down in the middle of Han Shuo's room with excited expressions. All of them were a bit excited. After a short conversation, Han Shuo knew that Trunks had gathered a few dozen mercenaries from the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band to deal with Florida. They hadn't entered the valley immediately, but were instead waiting in a cave outside the valley, waiting for Trunks' orders. Trunks had been a member of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band before and had a wealth of experience as a mercenary. He understood all the processes of a mercenary band's operations, and what he lacked now was the funds to register the mercenary guild and maintain the band's normal operations. Phoebe was in charge of the Boost Merchant Guild, and the guild alone could provide many lucrative jobs. In addition, the guild was rich and imposing, and could temporarily take care of the lack of funds. Emily had a strong information network in the Dark Mantle, and with her position and identity in the Dark Mantle, she could absolutely provide Han Shuo and Trunks with a lot of valuable information. This was also very useful. Not only was Emily quite excited after the conversation, but even Phoebe was also quite interested. Han Shuo was well aware of Trunks' skills and strength. Once this mercenary band was established and started operating, business would certainly not be too bad. Trunks, calculate how many gold coins you're still lacking? Han Shuo looked at Trunks and asked. Up until now, both Han Shuo and Phoebe had expressed strong interest. As the current owner of the Boost Merchant Guild, Phoebe's problem of funds shouldn't be too hard to solve. When Trunks heard Han Shuo ask about the most important matter, he said with a bit of excitement. The Mercenary Guild will be registered and the price will be calculated according to the number of members. Each member's salary, equipment, weapons, and warhorses, as well as the mercenary band's location will all require gold coins. Currently, only 50 to 60 people had come to the Valley of Sunshine. These people were the backbone of the former Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. They'd only need to invest 20,000 gold coins to form a new mercenary band. In the future, depending on the number of members and their strength, we may need to increase the costs. However, once our mercenary group's name is known and we have our own stable partners, not only will we not need to continue investing gold coins, but we can also continue to accumulate gold coins and slowly increase our strength. Glancing at Phoebe and then at Trunks, Han Shuo smiled faintly. I've reaped great rewards from my last trip to the Dark Forest. I think that the wealth I gained from that trip is enough to establish this mercenary band. During his last trip to the underground world, Han Shuo had obtained large amounts of gems and crystals from the dark elves and lizardmen. Adding on the jewels he'd obtained from the forest troll's sacred ground, it was even more than what he'd given to Phoebe last time. Therefore, when Han Shaw took out all the wealth he'd accumulated during this time from his space ring and placed them in the hall, whether it was Phoebe, Emily, or even Trunks, they were all dumbfounded and shocked to the core. Under the illumination of the lights, dazzling multicolored light shone from all kinds of gems and jade. The wealth piled up to the size of a small mountain. Even wealthy people like Emily and Phoebe, who were used to seeing such sights, were momentarily dazed. "Oh my gosh, where did you get all these things from?" Emily exclaimed, her beautiful face filled with shock as she stared at Han Shaw. "Last time was a pile of treasures, and this time it's even bigger. The wealth here is absolutely worth 50,000 gold coins if converted into gold coins. Where did you get all of this?" Emily was also astonished and exclaimed in disbelief. On the other side, Trunks shook his head with a wry smile after a brief moment of daze. He said, "I stayed in the dark forest for 3 years and hunted hundreds of magical creatures, but I didn't even earn 10,000 gold coins. You're truly incredible. Help me convert these things into gold coins, and then give 30,000 gold coins to Trunks as the initial investment for establishing the mercenary band. I'll leave the rest with you. Help me purchase the materials I need." Han Sho smiled faintly and said to Phoebe. Before Han Sho and Phoebe had confirmed their relationship, Han Sho had already placed a great deal of trust in her. Now that the two of them had been intimate with each other, he naturally had even less scruples. Phoebe also felt that Han Sho's trust was a matter of course. She nodded her head in agreement and smiled lightly. "Don't worry, I'll help you take care of everything. The Valley of Sunshine is the best place to do business. I'll help you convert these things into gold coins in the next 2 days." Emily was obviously a bit jealous when she saw that Han Sho had entrusted this enormous fortune to Phoebe without reservation. However, she also knew that as the owner of the Buzz Merchant Guild, Phoebe was the most suitable person to do this sort of thing, so she didn't say much. Where did you get this bow from?" Just as Phoebe was putting these items away into her space ring, Trunks suddenly walked over with a face full of astonishment. He picked up a bow with an odd pattern on it and asked Han Sho. Han Sho suddenly remembered that this bow had come from a dark elf. A dark elf had once used up all of his life force to draw an arrow with this bow, causing heavy damage to Dark Dragon Gilbert. Afterwards, when Han Sho had obtained this bow, he hadn't discovered anything after studying it for a while. Add to that the fact that Han Sho wasn't willing to use his life to draw an arrow, he'd thrown it into his space ring and hadn't asked about it. "I obtained it from a dark elf family in the underground world. This bow is quite odd. It seems to be able to absorb a person's life force to shoot a terrifying arrow," Han Sho explained. "My gosh, this should be the bow that was cursed by Rose. Legend has it that the Dark Elves worshipped the evil goddess Rose and cursed this bow. It can absorb the user's life force and shoot a frighteningly powerful shot. Only perverted Avengers would use it without regard for their own life and death." Emily cried out in surprise. It looked like she'd heard of the legend of this bow. "Correct, it's this bow. However, I've heard that before this bow was cursed, it was a wondrous treasure that could amplify thunder magic. If a thunder mage took this bow and used it, they would be able to shoot an astonishing amount of lightning. It's extremely powerful." Trunks grabbed the bow and said to Han Sho, "Keep it, maybe someone will be able to remove the curse in the future. If the curse is removed, then this bow will definitely be a treasure that thunder mages will fight over." Emily thought for a moment and said to Han Sho, "Even if this bow that could absorb life force was taken out to be sold, there probably wouldn't be many people who would dare buy it. As a demonic cultivator, as his strength increased, Han Sho could use his magical yuan to forge magical weapons with a matrix. Perhaps there would be a way to remove the curse on it in the future." Therefore, under Emily's persuasion, Han Sho nodded and put the bow away. He said, "That's a good idea. Perhaps we can use the altar to communicate with the evil god and remove the curse. We can try it in the future." After obtaining Clarendon's memories, Han Sho understood a few ways to communicate with the evil god. In principle, As long as you could provide the evil god with enough sacrifices, you would receive the evil god's corresponding favor. This was actually another form of business. After a while, all of the glowing jewels in the hall had been stored away by Phoebe into her space ring. Han Sho then thought for a moment, and took out another batch of dwarf-forged weapons, handing a heavy battle-axe to Trunks. Han Sho said with a smile, "What do you think of the quality?" Trunks' eyes had already lit up when Han Sho had taken out these weapons, and he picked up the battle-axe without a trace of politeness. The sharp surface of the battle-axe was as bright as a mirror, and when Trunks shook it in his hand, the whistling sound of the wind actually came from the axe. As the battle-axe swayed in his hand, there was a chilling, killing intent to it. "Good stuff, where did you get it?" Trunks was overjoyed as he looked at Han Sho. "These weapons were all forged by the dwarves. Perhaps there are some things inside that will be suitable for our companions." Han Sho smiled faintly and responded, "Haha, I'm sure they'll like it. The dwarves are famed for their skill in forging weapons on the continent. When you took out these weapons just now, I knew they weren't ordinary items." Trunks didn't stand on ceremony and readily stored all of these weapons into his space ring. He was silent for a moment afterwards and looked casually at Han Sho, saying with a smile, "Captain, everything is ready now, we're just waiting for you to pick a resounding name." Han Sho was startled when he heard these words, and then he waved his hands with a smile, declining. "I only want the position of vice captain, that's enough. You should be the real captain, you can decide the name of the mercenary band." Trunks, who had been all smiles just now, suddenly straightened his face and firmly refused. "You must be the captain of the mercenary band. There's no room for discussion on this matter. If you refuse, then I'd rather refuse your good intentions and everything I've said before will be null and void." Emily and Phoebe had actually long since wanted to ask just who the master of the mercenary band was. However, it didn't seem very good to ask this out loud, so they'd held it back and decided to take some time to discuss it with Han Sho. To the two girls, if they were to put in any effort for the mercenary band, it would only be if it was Han Sho's. They weren't familiar with Trunks, and naturally didn't have any friendship to speak of. Although Han Sho and Trunks seemed to have a good relationship, they obviously wouldn't agree to put their lives on the line for Trunks. The two girls showed intense interest when the thought that had been bothering them was brought up by Trunks. Two pairs of beautiful eyes constantly roamed between Han Sho and Trunks, anxiously waiting for the two's decision. "Trunks, I don't know anything about the formation and management of a mercenary band. If I were to be the captain, it would indeed be a bit inappropriate." Han Sho really didn't know what a mercenary band needed to pay attention to, so he spoke up. "No problem, you just need to give guidance on the big picture. As the vice captain, I can take care of these small matters for you. Brian, only with you as the captain will Miss Emily and Miss Phoebe spend their energy to help us. I don't have the energy to win them over." Trunks laughed self-deprecatingly and winked at Han Sho, speaking meaningfully. If that's the case, then don't decline." Emily didn't seem embarrassed at all, as if Trunks' words were a matter of course. Phoebe also nodded with an apathetic expression and said to Han Sho, "That's right, only with you as the captain will I unconditionally help this mercenary band. All right, men should be more decisive. Hurry up and decide on the name of the mercenary band." "Let me register with the Mercenary Association and officially provide a new home for my brothers." Trunks looked at Han Sho and urged. Han Sho was actually more aware of the current situation than anyone else. When he saw that everything that needed to be done and said had been settled, he no longer hesitated and readily agreed. "All right, then let's call it the Soul Destroyer Mercenary Band." "You're such a hypocrite. You've already thought of the name, and you still say you don't want to take this position. You just had to pretend to decline. You're really shameless." Trunks couldn't help but laugh when he heard Han Sho quickly announce the name. He couldn't help but curse Han Sho. Emily and Phoebe also looked at Han Sho with astonishment, as if they hadn't expected that Han Sho would think of a name so quickly. They also knew that Han Shu indeed had the intention of taking charge of this mercenary band long ago. It seemed that his previous excuses were indeed just polite words. He's always been this shameless. Emily and Phoebe agreed with Trunks' cursing and actually opened their mouths to say the same thing. When the two girls finished speaking, they discovered that their words were exactly the same as the other person's. This made them feel extremely amused and they couldn't help but laugh out loud. Alright, let's call it the Soul Destroyer Mercenary Band. I'm going to get things done now. You guys can also get busy, Trunks said. Chapter 206. Once the matter was settled, the hot-blooded youths with money and connections moved quickly. Florida's injuries were quite serious, and from the Cairo mercenary band's news, he was still in a coma. Edwin's every move was closely monitored when he arrived in the Valley of Sunshine. He'd stayed in a hotel for the past couple of days and didn't walk around. It looked like he was planning on stabilizing the injury on his back first. Trunks immediately left the Valley of Sunshine after confirming matters with Han Shu. He said that he wanted to discuss with his mercenary brothers and settle the matters that needed to be done soon. He also wanted to tell them the good news that Florida had been seriously injured. Phoebe had received Han Shu's large sum of wealth and appeared in Tanai Valley of Sunshine over the past couple of days. She used her connections to find a few large merchants to discuss matters of sale, and also continued to help Han Shu purchase the materials needed to refine the wood and water elite zombies. Emily stayed in the Dark Mantle stronghold and seemed to be communicating with the higher-ups. It seemed that the senior executives of the Dark Mantle were planning on making a big move against Bob Asher this time. Trunks, who was familiar with the matter, was busy setting up the mercenary band. Han Shu didn't have much to do after the issue of gold coins had been resolved. He used the 2 days of free time to return to the Cemetery of Death. Han Shu wasn't actually that worried about Edwin's threat. After all, there was a dark dragon in the Cemetery of Death who could help him. Through communication, Han Shu knew that if Dark Dragon Gilbert wanted to recover quickly, he'd need to absorb the cores of some magical creatures in order to recover quickly. It was because he understood this point, and that Han Shu needed to make use of Dark Dragon Gilbert's strength, that he'd brought the injured Gilbert to hunt some high-level magical creatures in the dark forest over the past 2 days. 7 Windblade Wolves, 4 Frost Eagles, and 1 Medusa had been hunted down by the 2 of them in a short 2 days. With Han Shu's current strength and Dark Dragon Gilbert's assistance, even a high-level existence like the Medusa had been killed by the combined efforts of the 2 of them. Gilbert had absorbed the energy within the magical beast cores and the Medusa's precious blood. His originally heavily injured body had mostly recovered, and his strength was no longer affected by his injuries. The cores of the magical beasts had all been absorbed by Gilbert, but the fangs, skin, and flesh were naturally taken off by Han Shu. He had them all thrown into the warehouse of the Cemetery of Death. On the second night, Gilbert stayed in the Cemetery of Death to digest the magical beast cores, while Han Shu went to the wide and ferocious waterfall near the Cemetery of Death by himself. The Milky Way poured down like a torrent, carrying with it a violent force that could destroy everything in its path. It was as if it had fallen directly from the 9th heaven. In the frigid winter, Han Shu sat cross-legged on an enormous boulder near the center of the Cemetery of Death with his bare body, using his body to resist the impact of the waterfall. His naked body was dyed a bright red under the impact of the waterfall. Han Shu sat there cross-legged, his body fused with the rocks. He was as motionless as a boulder, like a lifeless stone statue. However, within Han Shu's body, the magical yuan was circulating rapidly like 10,000 galloping horses. All of his muscles, meridians, and bones were being tempered over and over again wherever the magical yuan passed. The demonic infant throbbed lightly in his lower abdomen. A small person that looked exactly like Han Shu was emanating a surging life force. Han Shu had continuously broken through in this period of time. He'd absorbed Johnny's soul last time, and it was only now that he'd completely digested it. Some messy information chaotically swayed in Han Shuo's mind. All sorts of messy memories were like clouds of smoke, making it hard for one to see clearly. Han Shuo understood that these messy information were all memories that Chu Kanglin had left in his mind. All this time, because Han Shuo's magical yuan hadn't reached the true demon realm, his brain hadn't been fully developed. Therefore, he could only receive bits and pieces of information every time. Most of his memories were still sealed in his mind. Now that he'd reached the true demon realm and his brain had been fully expanded by magical yuan, Han Shuo's memory, comprehension, and thinking abilities had all been greatly improved. When Han Shuo tried his best to explain himself, the originally blurry and messy memories were quickly torn apart and gradually became clear. Strange magical yuan techniques, sections of mysterious cultivation incantations, refining methods for all kinds of magical weapons, magical generals, and magical formations were all being rapidly processed in Han Shuo's mind. They were all imprinted in Han Shuo's mind, forever becoming an indelible memory in Han Shuo's mind. After an unknown period of time, Han Shuo suddenly woke up. Under the impact of the dripping waterfall, his eyes couldn't hide the excitement, pride, and confidence in himself. It was as if he'd been reborn, and his entire being was filled with an unprecedented confidence. Body consolidation, channel opening, molded spirit, true demon, bloodthirsty, separate demon, carnal, 9 changes, and omen realm. These 9 layers of magical yuan would allow a mortal to become an omnipotent godlike existence. That kind of terrifying power that could split the heavens and the earth apart, when the physical body was strong enough to move mountains and seas, and become an extraordinary existence that was immortal, presented a vast, mysterious, and grand blueprint in front of Han Shuo. Now that this blueprint had been unlocked, Han Shuo was like a paintbrush that could draw out his vast and limitless future according to the path in his heart. The power to reconstruct the physical body, fly in the sky, become immortal, surpass the cycle of reincarnation, and destroy the heavens and the earth really did exist. With a thought, the pores of all the muscles in his body expelled waves of murky gray air from his body. The murky air was the impurities of Johnny's soul. After Han Shuo's demon infant had absorbed the origin of the soul, it remained in his body. With a slight sway of his body, Han Shuo's boulder-like body suddenly flew through the air and landed steadily on a large tree. He put on a dark green warrior's robe and flew straight towards the cemetery of death. Master, you seem to be a bit different than usual. Gilbert looked at Han Shuo in surprise as soon as he entered the cemetery of death and couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh, what's different?" Han Shuo looked at Gilbert and smiled faintly. Shaking his head, Gilbert said, "I can't describe it. His eyes seem to be a bit more mysterious, and his aura is a bit different. He seems to have become more confident, as if he has the confidence of victory in his grasp after grasping the situation." Han Shuo understood that after obtaining all of Chu Tsangming's memories, he now knew many of the demonic arts like the back of his hand. Even if he didn't rely on Gilbert now, Han Shuo still had a way to deal with Edwin. It was just that it would be a bit more troublesome because he wasn't strong enough. "Since your injuries have healed, let's leave this place together." "That's great. Are you going to take me to do some sneaky things again this time?" "Don't waste my breath, do what I tell you to do." "Master, after you left today, I seem to have seen the soil in that area loosen for a bit." Gilbert first complained in an aggrieved manner, and then suddenly remembered something. He pointed at the place of extreme earth where the Earth Elite Zombie had been refined and said to Han Shuo. Han Shuo started and turned his head to look at that area. He suddenly discovered that the center had indeed sunk in. The earth yuan qi that had been lingering there had completely disappeared without a trace. Overjoyed, Han Shuo laughed heartily and said, "Very good, it looks like he's already absorbed all of the earth qi. He'll be able to break out of the ground in a few more days." "Humph, it's just a zombie, what's so great about it?" Gilbert cast a disdainful glance at the area and said unhappily. However, as soon as Gilbert finished speaking, the place where he was standing suddenly collapsed. After a wave of earth quaking and mountain shaking, an enormous gully appeared out of thin air and forcibly clamped down on Gilbert, who was caught off guard. The ruptured gully seemed to be alive as it continued to clamp down. Gilbert's body was flattened and he cursed loudly. All right, let him go! Han Sho could feel the Earth Elite Zombie's discontent buried deep in the ground and knew that it must have been the Earth Elite Zombie's doing. He opened his mouth to command. As Han Sho's voice sounded, the gully that had been continuously shrinking suddenly parted like a door. Unable to move, Gilbert discovered that all of this earthquake and the collapse of the ground was caused by the Earth Elite Zombie below. He couldn't help but have a face of shock and hastily crawled out when the gully loosened. He took form here, cultivated here, and absorbed the Earth origin energy. This place is his territory. As long as he is here, he can display several times his original strength. The earth will shake, the ground will shatter, or he can form a cage from the earth to trap you. He can even form an earth dragon to attack you. It's a piece of cake for him. Remember, don't go against him in his territory in the future. Buried deep underground, he's an invincible existence in this area. If he left this place, he might not be able to control everything as he pleases. But here, any piece of land can be transformed into his weapon. Han Sho explained faintly as he looked at Gilbert crawling out of the ravine with a supercilious smile. The 5 elemental zombies could greatly increase their own strength in the 5 places of extreme cultivation. It was unwise for anyone to provoke them in their cultivation area. The Earth Elite Zombie's response to Gilbert's words immediately affected him, made Han Sho understand that the Earth Elite Zombie was no longer a low-level zombie warrior that could only take orders. It looked like he was the same as the Little Skull and had already gained intelligence. Seeing that Gilbert had come up, the Earth Elite Zombie immediately became much more well-behaved. Han Sho opened his mouth and said in the direction of the Earth Elite Zombie, "Refine the earth chi well and try to break out of the earth as soon as possible." A thought was transmitted into Han Sho's mind through the connection. The Earth Elite Zombie had obviously heard Han Sho's words and sent over the meaning of understood. Let's go, let's leave this place first. Glancing at Gilbert, Han Sho walked towards the center of the cemetery of death. When he passed by the Demon Cave, Han Sho discovered that there were only 5 wraiths left. It looked like it wouldn't be long before the 3 demons would take form. Just what's going on with that zombie? How can he have such great strength? Gilbert couldn't help but ask Han Sho after they left the Earth Elite Zombie's location and arrived at the transportation matrix at the center of the cemetery of death. You wouldn't understand even if I told you. In short, he's different from any zombie warrior you know of. His existence has already changed since he started absorbing the earth chi. Remember, it's best not to provoke him in this cemetery of death. He'll be stronger than you can imagine here. Han Sho smiled faintly and instructed Gilbert. As he spoke, Han Sho pushed Gilbert into the center of the transportation matrix and activated it. The two returned to the Dark Mantle's secret stronghold in the Valley of Sunshine. Han Sho put away the 6 magic wands when they walked out of a secret room. He lifted a wooden board above his head, and the two walked up to a corridor leading to the top. "Brian, you're finally back!" Emily suddenly called out as soon as they emerged from the secret room. "Hi, beautiful woman, we meet again!" Gilbert greeted Emily with a teasing smile when he came up, causing Emily to roll her eyes. "What's wrong?" Having obtained all of Chu Kanglin's memories, Han Sho had ample confidence in his future. Han Sho believed that as long as he worked hard and advanced his demonic cultivation, he would definitely obtain strength that everyone would look up to. It was precisely because of this that Han Sho didn't pay too much attention to the current difficulties and setbacks. He asked Emily casually. "Florida has woken up. The Cairo mercenary band has just sent news that Florida has called for a meeting as soon as he's awakened. They're planning on making a move against us at all costs and want us to be careful. Also, Edwin and Belinda seem to have made a trip to the Cairo mercenary band in the past 2 days. We received this information ourselves and the Cairo mercenary band didn't tell us." Emily responded quickly. Nodding to indicate that he understood, Han Shaw frowned slightly and thought for a moment, saying with a smile, "We'll deal with the situation as it comes. If Florida dares come to his death, I'll make sure he'll have to bear the consequences. Don't worry about Edwin for now. I think that no matter how stupid Loriton is, he wouldn't make things difficult for us at this time. We're also the bargaining chips he's using right now. If he wants to deal with us, he'll definitely choose to do so after Florida's death. According to my estimations, Edwin may be able to obtain some information from the Cairo mercenary band, but Loriton will definitely not agree to work with him against us, nor will he choose to work with Edwin. Don't pay too much attention to this matter. What we need to do now is to defend our current stronghold." Emily was stunned for a moment by Han Shaw's words. Emily then looked oddly at Han Shaw, only then discovering that Han Shaw had maintained an aloof expression from beginning to end, as if he didn't care about any danger at all. His eyes were even more profound and mysterious, and his entire presence had changed. It was filled with an indescribable feeling, which surprised Emily a bit. "What is it? Why are you looking at me so strangely?" Han Shaw rubbed his nose and laughed involuntarily when he saw Emily's beautiful eyes staring at him without blinking. "Brian, has something happened to you in the past 2 days? Why do I feel like you're different from before?" Emily didn't hide her thoughts and asked directly. "Yes, Master is indeed a bit different from before. I've noticed it too." Gilbert couldn't help but raise a fuss at this time as his gaze continuously roamed over Han Shaw's body, seeming to want to find what was different about him. Nothing much. I've just obtained a large amount of memories in the past 2 days. These memories have helped me understand many things." Han Shaw had a mysterious smile on his face as he explained to Emily. Even now, Emily still felt that Han Shaw was incredibly mysterious. Some of the things that had happened to him seemed so miraculous and out of the ordinary. The little skull that didn't fear dark magic, the miraculous weapon that could soar above the 9 heavens without relying on magic or fighting aura. All of this was beyond her comprehension. "Forget it, I won't understand even if you explain. I only need to know that there's nothing wrong with you." Emily shook her head and gave up on pursuing the matter. She suddenly remembered what Han Shaw had said at the end and asked, "Oh right, you said that you want to defend our current stronghold. How do you plan on doing so?" With a mysterious smile on his face, Han Shaw mused for a moment and spat out 2 words that were completely foreign to Emily. "Set up the matrix." Chapter 207. Using some special materials and following the mysterious rules of heaven and earth to set up a formation that could seize the fortune of heaven and earth was a secret technique that all demonic cultivators should grasp. After digesting all of Chu Kanglin's memories, Han Shaw was no longer a passive person who would wait helplessly for death. Even if his current cultivation wasn't high enough, Han Shaw could still take the initiative by using some demonic formations. Using the method of acting first and reporting later, Han Shaw directly took over the shop with the place of extreme water. When Harris came over, Han Shaw used Florida as an excuse to beat around the bush. The glorious Tanai Cairo mercenary band was in charge of everything. As long as it was in the glorious Tanai Cairo mercenary band, they weren't afraid of Han Shaw playing any tricks. According to the agreement, as long as Han Shaw and the others killed Florida, the shop would belong to Han Shaw for free. Right now, Han Shaw was just taking it one step ahead of time. The shop wasn't like other things. If it was an ordinary item that could be carried around, Harris probably wouldn't be willing to hand it over to Han Shaw so early, because he was afraid that Han Shaw would take it away. However, the shop couldn't be moved, and Harris wasn't afraid that Han Shaw would be able to move it away. Moreover, the deed was still in their hands, so Harris didn't say anything after Han Shaw explained, tacitly agreeing to Han Shaw's actions. This shop that was rumored to be cursed by an evil god was even larger than Han Shaw had imagined. It covered an area of more than 400 square meters, and had a 70 to 80 square meters courtyard. There were also 8 or 9 rooms of various sizes, including furniture such as tables, chairs, beds, lamps, and so on. It was precisely because this was an ominous place that after the owner died, everything in the shop became ominous. No one would take the things in the shop out and cause trouble for themselves. Other than a few blankets and daily necessities, and a few rooms that were covered in dust because no one had lived here for a long time, the entire shop was not lacking anything. Before they discussed about forming a mercenary group, Hans Shaw had already explained the strangeness of this shop. Although Emily, Phoebe, and the others didn't fully understand Hans Shaw's explanation, they understood that Hans Shaw had already cleaned up the harmful things in the shop. Out of their unconditional trust in Hans Shaw, although the two women were still a little uncomfortable with this place, they did not clamor to stop Hans Shaw from staying. Since they had decided to set up the formation, they naturally had to make preparations beforehand. Emily and Phoebe came forward and provided a list to Hans Shaw. The two girls were responsible for collecting some necessary cold items as the most basic materials. Because he was worried about the two girls' safety, Hans Shaw had Dark Dragon Gilbert follow them. With such an extraordinary Dark Dragon, an Archmage, and a Sword Master, the two girls wouldn't be at a disadvantage even if they ran into Edwin. After everyone had been sent away, Hans Shaw chanted a necromancy spell and summoned a dozen skeletal warriors. After giving an order, the skeletal warriors picked up brooms and basins and began to clean the rooms one by one. The Shura Soul Formation was a demonic formation that would cause one to lose one's nature and sink into an illusion. This formation required the aura of death from 100 ghosts, condensed from cold corpses into 6 Shura pillars, and then used the blood of virgins as the brush and ink to inscribe demonic runes on the 6 pillars. In addition, a floating cloud stone would absorb 5 drops of the caster's blood essence as the eye of the formation. Once the formation was complete, any enemy who didn't understand the formation would immediately be assaulted by the aura of death from 100 ghosts if they walked in. Their entire mind would be thrown into disarray and hallucinate. They would discover their other self within the formation, wanting to kill them at all costs. Fear would cause them to instantly descend into a frenzy. No matter how resolute their mind was, it would be very difficult for them to overcome their true nature. The well in the center of the place of extreme water had been slightly modified by Hans Shaw and put to good use. With the well as the eye of the formation, he formed a small-scale water ghost possession formation, with some of the materials he'd recently collected for refining water elite zombies. A jellyfish was planted in every vengeful spirit, and they would be catalyzed into water ghosts in the well using a secret technique. Anyone who approached the well would be possessed by the water ghost and be dragged into the well. When he was setting up these two formations, Hans Shaw suddenly sighed with emotion that he indeed had foresight. Once Chu Kanglin's demonic arts and the necromancy of this world were used together, it would indeed have miraculous effects beyond imagination. The ghosts needed for the Shura Soul Formation could be replaced by vengeful spirits, and the cold corpses could be replaced by the bodies of ordinary skeletal warriors. The water ghosts for the Water Ghost Possession Formation also needed to be catalyzed by vengeful spirits. If Hans Shaw hadn't practiced necromancy, he would have had to go to some tombs and slowly gather these materials himself. However, with his identity as a necromancer, Hans Shaw only needed to recite a few incantations to gather all the materials, saving him a lot of effort. After a busy day, Emily, Phoebe, and Gilbert returned to the shop in the evening. They couldn't help but be surprised by the shop in front of them. 6 white bone pillars were inserted into the 6 corners of the courtyard. A cold and gloomy aura was emitted from the courtyard. In the void, groups of grey resentful spirits were flying around, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. An evil and gloomy feeling filled the air. In the middle of the well, a few white shadows floated erratically in the air, twisting into sinister and frightening faces. A blood-red stone sat in a groove next to the well. A few vengeful spirits floated in the air around the stone, and their bodies were also dyed blood-red. Hans Shaw sat cross-legged in front of the stone, shooting out rays of black light from his palms. His palms became a blurry, pitch-black color, and a dense light surrounded his body, making him look incomparably sinister. The doors to the rooms around the courtyard were all opened. The originally dusty rooms were now spotless, and all the rooms had been cleaned. The lights were bright, and it was filled with warmth and harmony. The sinister aura that lingered in the courtyard didn't seep into any of the rooms. "Oh my gosh, what are you doing?" Emily exclaimed. Her slender body turned on the spot, and her eyes were filled with curiosity. She was about to extend her hand to touch the azure stone pillar formed by the white bones. "Don't move!" Hanshaw suddenly opened his eyes and shouted at Emily. Emily, who was about to touch the azure stone pillar, retracted her jade-like hand when she heard this, as though she was startled. Phoebe and Gilbert were still a little slow. They hadn't expected that in less than a day, this place would actually undergo earth-shattering changes in Hanshaw's hands. The courtyard was filled with a sinister and strange aura, causing them to feel instinctively uncomfortable. They had never seen some of the strange things and decorations, and they didn't know what they were used for. Their minds were filled with questions. With a faint smile, Hanshaw stood up from his cross-legged position and dripped a bewitching drop of blood from his right hand onto the stone in front of him. The courtyard, which was already filled with sinister gusts of wind, became even more sinister after this drop of blood was dripped into it. Vengeful spirits howled and danced in the air. A sinister and cold aura of death was incomparably dense, causing one's heart to tremble. "Did you get what I asked you to buy?" Hanshaw asked with a faint smile. "You should ask him. The most important things were all collected by him." Phoebe's face was flushed red as she pointed at Gilbert. "Evil master, why would you think of collecting the eaten blood of virgins? You're too shameless and filthy!" Gilbert cried out and looked at Hanshaw with a face full of disdain, appearing quite excited. "Cut the crap, did you get what you wanted?" Hanshaw glared angrily at Gilbert. "Heh, I got it. There's nothing that can't be done with gold coins." "I only spent 50 gold coins to walk around a few alleys in the Valley of Sunshine, and got what you wanted from the owner," Gilbert said as he took out a palm-sized bottle and handed it to Hanshaw. Emily and Phoebe both snorted coldly when they saw him take out the bottle of virgin blood, turning their heads and walking towards the rooms in the courtyard. "Humph, what did I do? I didn't do it willingly, it was all Master's orders." "Do you think I did it willingly?" Those stinky women in the alleys all looked at me as if I was a pervert with a special hobby. If I hadn't taken out the gold coins, I'm afraid I would have drowned in their spittle. Gilbert was quite aggrieved when he saw Emily and Phoebe look at him with extreme disdain, and couldn't help but complain. Some rich customers in the Valley of Sunshine liked virgins to serve them. Therefore, in order to attract more customers, the owners would spend large sums of money to buy some virgin slaves. Hanshaw knew this and thus had asked Gilbert to do this. Although Hanshaw's skin was thick enough, it was still a bit embarrassing for him to buy something like this from others. After all, in the eyes of those who didn't know the truth, this kind of behavior was quite perverted. All right, go do what you need to do, don't bother me." Hanshaw was very understanding of Gilbert's grievances, but didn't console him. Before they returned, Hanshaw had already used the demon's layer edge to carve a complicated pattern on the 6 azure pillars formed from the cold corpses. He drew a bucket of spirit water from a place of extreme water and diluted the bottle of virgin blood into it. Using a peachwood spoon to stir the water, Hanshaw grabbed the bucket and flew out. He leapt onto the first azure pillar and started pouring the liquid from the top of the pillar. Seeing that Hanshaw had started to work, Emily and Phoebe, who had just entered the warm room, walked out again. 2 pairs of bright eyes watched Hanshaw's movements with curiosity. The reddish-brown liquid flowed down the pattern that Hanshaw had carved earlier. Miraculously, not a single drop of the liquid rolled down. It was as if it was tightly attracted by a force, all of it imprinted into the grooves carved into the stone pillars. One by one, when Hanshaw had completed the 6 pillars, Hanshaw casually threw the empty bucket to the side and flew to the blood-red stone beside the well. He formed a hand sign to control the demonic formation, and a black light flew out from Hanshaw's palm, landing in the center of the blood-red stone. Suddenly, the 6 stone pillars shone with a reddish-brown light. The patterns engraved on the azure pillars were densely packed with all kinds of ferocious ghost faces. The hundreds of wraiths that had been flying around the courtyard were like baby swallows' ghost nests, as they flew into the sinister ghost faces engraved on the stone pillars with a whooshing sound. The wraiths that were originally in a state of nothingness seemed to merge with the sinister ghost faces as soon as they fell into the azure pillars. Each and every one of them seemed to have a body and began to twist and turn on the stone pillars, revealing a bloody mouth full of fangs. Shrill cries of despair instantly resounded through the night sky, causing one's hair to stand on end and their hearts to tremble. Not good. Han Sho was shocked. He hadn't thought that after the formation was formed, there would be such terrifying cries of ghosts and howls of wolves. He immediately formed another hand sign, which fell into the floating cloud stone that had absorbed 5 drops of his blood essence. In an instant, the wraiths that had a body were abruptly sucked into the azure pillars. The stone pillars with hundreds of dancing ghosts suddenly returned to normal. The wraiths within the stone pillars seemed to have been frozen in the sinister ghost faces, without the slightest sign of life. Give me all the remaining materials. The formation will be formed soon. Even if that old monster Edwin comes, I will make him suffer. Han Sho laughed maniacally as he spoke to Phoebe and Emily. The 2 girls were horrified. When they heard Han Sho's words, their minds were in a mess as they handed over the cold and evil items that Han Sho had ordered them to purchase to Han Sho one by one. After he'd obtained all the materials, Han Sho's body flitted through the center of the yard under the trio's incredibly puzzled gazes. It was at this moment that the trio discovered that there were many large and small grooves in the ground of the yard. These grooves had been cut flat, and were just enough for Han Sho to place all the items in. When everything was done, Han Sho retreated from the courtyard. When Han Sho stood beside Phoebe and Emily, he called Gilbert to his side. With a single thought, a beam of blood-red light shot into the sky from the courtyard. In an instant, a chilly wind blew through the courtyard, and the ghosts on the 6 stone pillars danced wildly. An extremely cold and evil feeling instantly filled the hearts of Phoebe and the others. The 3 of them understood that the originally simple courtyard had become a life-threatening danger zone after Han Sho's torment. Turning his head to look at Emily, Han Sho had a mysterious smile on his face as he spoke to the trio. As long as we set up a soundproof boundary around the area, then it'll be foolproof. Leave this matter to me. Emily understood and released a dark magic spell. A wave of magic suddenly appeared in the air above the courtyard, like a colorless and formless cover, covering the sky above the courtyard. What's going on? Is the evil god's curse acting up again? Harris's shout suddenly came from outside. A series of footsteps could be heard as Harris and the others from the Cairo mercenary band appeared in front of the shop on their war horses. Harris dismounted and knocked on the door as he called out. Because the floating cloud stone was the eye of the formation and had 5 drops of Han Sho's blood essence on it, Han Sho only needed a thought to use the floating cloud stone to control the entire formation within this area. When he heard Harris's shouts, Han Sho made some slight adjustments to the formation. All of the abnormalities within the courtyard returned to their original state. Apart from the 6 azure pillars, there were no other changes. Nothing much, Mr. Harris. Is there some news that you want to tell us? Han Sho opened the door to the shop and allowed Harris to enter. He answered calmly with a face full of smiles. After Harris entered, his sharp eyes looked around, scanning every corner of the shop. Only then did he ask Han Sho with some confusion. Why are there 6 strange stone pillars all of a sudden? Oh, we're planning on staying here for a long time. Because we're lacking something to dry our clothes on, we got 6 pillars as support. How did Mr. Harris find the time to come over? There was a bright red light just now, and some of the people in the surrounding shops heard a terrifying howl from within. They said that it was frightening and told us to come over to take a look. I was worried that something would happen to you, so I came over to take a look. Laughing lightly, Han Sho said jokingly. Those people are always so ignorant. We were just practicing magic just now. With the few of us here, even if the curse came true, we wouldn't be afraid. Don't worry. Eh? Is this pervert who collects the eaten blood of virgins also your friend? Harris nodded and didn't say much. He was about to leave when he suddenly discovered Gilbert, and couldn't help but ask Han Shuo. I guess so. Han Shuo was a bit embarrassed and turned to glare at Gilbert, who was about to explode, to indicate for him to shut up. He then explained to Harris. Why do you have a friend like this? He's so disgusting. Harris looked at Gilbert with extreme disdain and didn't want to stay here any longer. He hurriedly left with the others as if he was trying to hide. God damn it, it's all Master's orders, what does it have to do with me? After Harris left, Gilbert finally couldn't take it any more and roared angrily, seething with anger. Chapter 208. After Han Shuo's torment, the shop had truly become a place of great danger. Without Han Shuo's guidance, anyone who tried to enter would be attacked by the demonic formation. Those with insufficient willpower would lose their minds and seek their own deaths. After the shop had been completely remodeled, Phoebe, Emily, and Gilbert all took up residence. The three of them were on tenterhooks the entire night when they saw the strangeness of the yard, deathly afraid that something would happen to them while they slept soundly. The night passed peacefully, and Trunks returned at noon the next day after having been gone for a few days. As soon as Trunks entered the Valley of Sunshine, he learned from Harris of the Cairo mercenary band that Han Shuo's group had moved to the cursed shop. When Trunks arrived, he found that there were suddenly 6 white stone pillars in the yard. He was quite flabbergasted and didn't know what was going on. When I came over, I heard from Harris that something strange happened here last night. Did you guys run into something? Trunks asked when he sat down in the living room of the shop. Smiling faintly, Han Shuo explained. We did indeed run into something, but it wasn't some evil god's curse. I created it myself. You don't need to worry about anything, there are quite a few rooms here. I've already reserved one for you. Forget it, it's safer for me to change places. I've seen many owners of this shop die mysteriously in Tunai of Sunshine a few years ago. Although you said that the danger has been resolved, I'm still a bit worried. Trunks was obviously traumatized and immediately waved his hands with a wry smile. Who is this kid? He dares not believe in Master. Dark Dragon Gilbert was in a bad mood after being called a perverted pervert. He couldn't help but yell when he heard Trunks waffle and refused to stay. And who are you? Trunks started and suddenly looked at Gilbert. The manticore that Trunks had been riding had already displayed abnormalities when he'd entered. The originally fearless manticore was instinctively on guard against Gilbert. It tried not to get too close to Gilbert. As a magical beast with intelligence, the manticore could naturally sense the powerful presence of the super-ranked Dark Dragon. Even though Gilbert had transformed into his human form, the manticore still did not dare to approach Gilbert. This was a fear brought about by the difference in rank. As the manticore's master, Gilbert had been with the manticore for a few years and was very familiar with its temperament. Seeing that the manticore was behaving so strangely, Gilbert, who had noticed it from the start, couldn't help but ask. I am the mighty Black Dragon clan, the future most outstanding king, Gilbert. Gilbert had an arrogant look on his face as he shouted in a booming voice. Just like your manticore, he's my magical pet, a lecherous little dark dragon. Han Shuo flicked a glance at Gilbert and explained to Trunks. Trunks was very shocked when he heard that Gilbert was a dark dragon. He then couldn't help but sigh. You're really something. I thought taming a manticore was already something to be proud of, but you actually have a dark dragon. It looks like you're a bit stronger than me. It's not my fault, I just happened to pick up a bargain. It was this dark dragon who shamelessly pestered me. Han Shuo shrugged and said modestly. He then paused and changed his tone, asking Trunks. Right, you didn't run into any danger when you left the valley this time, did you? How did things go? Trunk's face grew serious when he saw that Han Sho was talking about serious matters. He said lowly, "Don't worry, I'm more familiar with the geography of the Valley of Sunshine than Loriton and Florida. It won't be easy for anyone to harm me in the Valley of Sunshine. I've met with some of my old friends and they've expressed great interest in forming a mercenary band. I've already arranged for people to apply for the title of Soul Destroyer. We'll be able to officially have our own title before long." Nodding, Han Sho said, "That's good. This will be our base of operations now. With Florida's power, he'll surely be able to find our current location. We don't need to be in a hurry, we just need to wait for him to attack us." With the existence of the magical formation, Han Sho wanted to test it out on Florida's men. He wanted to see if the magical formation was as wondrous as Chu Kanglin's memories had described. Unexpectedly, neither Florida's men nor Edwin came looking for trouble after another 2 days. Han Sho's group stayed here for the past 2 days, only wandering around the busy merchant streets for a bit during the day. All the materials needed to refine the wood elite zombie had finally been gathered. Phoebe used these days to discuss a few deals with a few merchants, exchanging 2/3 of the jewels and crystals that Han Sho had given her for 40,000 gold coins. These 40,000 gold coins were handed over to Trunks with great trust by Han Sho, allowing him to use them reasonably to form the Soul Destroyer mercenary band. Han Sho silently practiced his magical arts in his room, not taking a single step out of the shop in the past 2 days. After a low incantation, the courtyard that was illuminated by the sun was suddenly covered by dark green clouds, plunging the entire courtyard into darkness. The sinister greenish-black clouds engulfed the entire radiance of the sun. A strong deathly aura spread rapidly, filling the courtyard in an instant. The vengeful spirits sealed in the stone pillars sensed this wonderful aura and seemed to be eager to make a move. The canopy of necromancy spell could cause the aura of death to spread out. Dark creatures within the range of the canopy of necromancy would greatly increase their attack power. This force instantly burst out, and with the purple demon eye as the center, it tried to invade the bodies of the Little Skull and Han Sho, intending to take control of the bodies of the Little Skull and Han Sho. Just like the situation in the Holy Land of Forest Troll, this force came from the purple demon eye. It was filled with a violent desire to plunder everything, and it would suddenly attack after the eye patch was taken off, as if the demon Dadera demon had really left a part of her divine sense in the purple demon eye. "Put on the eye patch, hurry up!" Han Sho's entire body trembled from the pain, as if several sharp knives were violently stirring in his mind. He suddenly yelled out, his body trembling with pain. The Little Skull was also suffering. He fell to the ground and kept rolling. After receiving the order from Han Sho, he finally put on the eye patch with trembling hands. Miraculously, the force that invaded the bodies of the two disappeared without a trace as the eye patch was put on. However, just as Han Sho heaved a sigh of relief and turned to look at the little skeleton, he saw purple light shoot out of the little skeleton's left eye. The eye patch that he'd been using to cover his purple demon eye seemed to be incinerated by a raging fire, turning into sparks and disappearing in the wind. Chapter 209. After the eye patch that sealed the purple demon eye was incinerated into ashes, the purple demon eye embedded in the little skull's left eye socket once again emitted a blinding purple light. In an instant, the heart-wrenching pain once again invaded Han Sho and the little skull's bodies. The unforgettable pain caused both Han Sho and the little skull to tremble uncontrollably. In the room, Han Sho couldn't help but let out a low growl. The little skull's white mouth was also smacking its lips. The man and the skeleton were simultaneously invaded by an inexplicable power. Suddenly, the demon infant that was originally hibernating in Han Sho's lower abdomen produced a huge suction force, much to Han Sho's surprise. In an instant, Han Sho had the illusion that the demon infant had become a boundless black hole. With the demon infant as the center, Han Sho's body seemed to have become a huge spider web, and all of his meridians had become tenacious lines that resembled spider webs. The power that invaded Han Shuo's body was attracted by the demon infant and automatically gathered at Han Shuo's demon infant through the spider web-like meridians like a trickle returning to the sea. Following this sudden change in his body, the unforgettable pain suddenly weakened by a lot. The power that invaded Han Shuo's body was sent to the demon infant through his meridians. Just like how Johnny's soul energy was digested and absorbed, it furiously nourished the demon infant's growth. After the pain in his body gradually came under control, Han Shuo saw that the little skull was still rolling on the ground. With a thought, Han Shuo suddenly struggled to come to the little skull's side. He opened his left hand and aimed his palm at the left eye socket of the little skull where the purple demon eye was stored. He took the initiative to release the demonic art of assimilation. His left hand suddenly shone with a dense demonic light. Rays of faint purple light flowed from Han Shuo's arm into Han Shuo's body. Just like the power in Han Shuo's body, it was sent to the demon infant through his meridians. At this time, Han Shuo was sure that the power from the purple demon eye was also soul energy. It seemed to have a close relationship with the protector of the forest troll, the demon Dadera. Perhaps it really was a wisp of soul energy left behind by the demon Dadera in this plane. Compared to Johnny's soul energy, the soul energy that came from the purple demon eye was much larger and purer. It was filled with a violent and plundering aura and wasn't rejected by the demon infant at all. Once it fell into the demon infant would frantically circulate it, and slowly convert and purify the enormous power. Looking inside the demon infant, Han Shuo could see that the demon infant was like a sun burning with black demonic fire, bursting with blazing demonic light. Han Shuo's body also shone brightly at this time. Waves of violent, chaotic, evil demonic energy curled around Han Shuo's body. From afar, it looked like Han Shuo suddenly had countless black arms dancing around his body. After an unknown amount of time, Han Shuo suddenly let go. There was a crisp crack, and the purple demon eye in the little skull's left eye socket seemed to have shattered. The purple demon eye suddenly became dim, and a cloud of dense purple smoke overflowed from his left eye socket. The demon infant was still circulating frantically. The soul energy that it had just obtained from the purple demon eye was much stronger than what it had obtained from Johnny a few days ago. When Han Shuo sensed that all the power had been absorbed by the demon infant, he gave an order to the little skull to protect himself. He sat cross-legged and entered a state of bitter cultivation and digestion. The power of the purple demon eye was completely absorbed by Han Shuo's demon infant. The little skull, who was in excruciating pain like Han Shuo, sat on the ground in a daze for a long time. After the strange power of the purple demon eye disappeared, it was embedded in the little skull's left eye socket. As it rolled around, it gave the little skull a more lively look. "What's going on?" When Emily and Gilbert sensed the black demonic aura bursting out from Han Shuo's room, they couldn't help but come to investigate. When the little skull, who was sitting on the ground, heard the noise outside, it straightened its legs and stood up. The purple demon eye blinked a few times, and it walked to the door to open it. When Emily and Gilbert saw the door open, and a short, pure white little skull suddenly appeared in front of them. The little skull had a purple eyeball in its left eye socket, and it was rolling around. They were shocked and couldn't help but take a few steps back. It pointed at Han Shuo with its left hand. The little skull's left eye rolled around, and it looked at Emily and Gilbert. It put its hand on its mouth and made a shushing gesture, which meant, "He needs silence. Don't disturb him." Emily and Gilbert stared at the little skull that was asking them to keep quiet. For a moment, they felt that the scene in front of them was too challenging. A dark creature making such a humanoid gesture in front of them, especially with its left eye socket and its eyeball moving around. All of this was so unimaginable. It was a good thing that this wasn't Emily's first day knowing Han Shuo. When she had first fought with Han Shuo, she had already suffered at the hands of this little skull. Therefore, when she carefully looked at the little skull and discovered the 7 bone spurs on its back, she immediately understood that although the color of the bones had changed, this little skull was still the mysterious little skull that was immune to most dark magic, the one that had chased her for days and left her helpless. "I think your master must have made some miraculous progress again." "Let's not disturb him." Taking a deep breath, Emily shook her head at Gilbert, indicating for Gilbert to retreat with her. Last time in the Cemetery of Death, the Earth Elite Zombie's sudden outburst had already made Gilbert realize that the dark creatures his master had summoned were absolutely different from the ones he knew. A zombie could form an enormous ravine in the ground and attack him because of a single sentence. Then this little skull with humanoid gestures wasn't that hard to understand. "I think it'll be very interesting in the future to follow a master like this." Gilbert looked at the little skeleton with great curiosity and waved goodbye. He closed the door and said to Emily, "It's fine, but it's fine." "I think so too, but you need to continuously improve yourself. Otherwise, you might discover one day that you can't even beat a dark creature your master has summoned." Emily had heard from Han Shaw that the dark creatures he'd refined had limitless potential to evolve on their own. She hadn't quite believed it at first, but now that she'd seen the little skull's performance, she was convinced without a doubt. Han Shaw didn't feel anything when Emily and Gilbert entered. The enormous power from the purple demon eye allowed Han Shaw to focus his attention to the extreme, completely unaffected by the various disturbances of the outside world. Some demonic practitioners would need to find an extremely quiet place to train in seclusion when they needed to practice a certain secret art or demonic treasure. They would also need to set up layers of defensive measures to prevent others from disturbing them. The reason why they were so cautious was because that state was when the demonic practitioner would be least prepared. They couldn't be disturbed in the slightest when refining demonic treasures or practicing demonic arts. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would suffer deviation and waste all their previous efforts. Another 2 days and 2 nights passed after Han Shaw's preparations. Han Shaw didn't take a single step out of his room during these 2 days and 2 nights. Phoebe, Emily, and Trunks didn't slack off during these 2 days. They were either busy with the matters of establishing the mercenary band or continuing to discuss business to help Han Shaw sell the jewels and items. On this day, in the middle of the night, a few people were in the shop discussing how to make better use of the gold coins and manage the mercenary group's affairs. Suddenly, a mercenary from the Cairo mercenary group knocked on the door and said that a group of people were on their way. The mercenary from the Cairo mercenary group immediately left after reporting this information. He said that he needed to report this information to the leader or vice leader of the Cairo mercenary group. He told Emily and the others to be careful and that their people would arrive within half an hour. "It looks like the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band has arrived. Brian can't be disturbed at the moment, and we don't know when he'll wake up either. This is a bit troublesome," Emily said with a slight frown after the mercenary left. "Who cares who they are? If they dare trespass here, we'll make them suffer the consequences." Dark Dragon Gilbert obviously didn't take this matter to heart, as he spoke carelessly. "It won't be that easy to deal with. Florida's Rainbow Sickle mercenary band is full of experts, and the Church of Light has also sent some experts to him. You may not be able to win even if you transform into your dragon form." Trunks' brow was also deeply furrowed as he spoke lowly. "Brian can't be disturbed right now. There's that dark creature protecting him inside and he shouldn't be able to leave. We must protect him if he's here. As long as we hold them off for a while and wait for the Cairo mercenary band to arrive, then there won't be any problems." Phoebe thought for a moment and responded. The hoofbeats of the warhorses resounded in the silent night sky. From the volume of the sound, one could tell that the hooves of the warhorses were covered by something soft like cotton cloth. "Be careful. Protect Brian's room first," Emily called out lightly and instructed the others. Chapter 210. The enemy had come faster than they had imagined. The clattering of iron hooves had just sounded in the distance when strange noises came from the rooftops. "Come, let's leave the room and go into the yard." Trunk's expression was calm as he hefted a long sword and led the way into the yard with the manticore. There was a wide yard in the center of the shop, surrounded by several large and small houses that surrounded the yard. If the enemy came to attack, and the power of their attacks directly passed through the walls and into the houses, they would be forced into a passive position if they wanted to leave after adding fire magic to it. In addition, the yard had been meticulously decorated by Han Shuo. Han Shuo had once told them that the 6 pillars contained great danger, but if they stood in a special position next to the pillars, they would instead be unaffected by the formation. The formation hadn't been activated yet, but if the 6 pillars were fiercely attacked, the formation would automatically react even without Han Shuo's orders. "We're not familiar with the things in the yard, so don't act rashly unless we have no other choice. But if we really can't withstand it, we'll attack the stone pillars and quickly hide in 6 safe places. Let's gamble." Emily walked into the yard and took out her staff as she spoke to the 3. The canopy of necromancy that Han Shuo had cast last time was no longer effective because it had been 2 days. Specks of starlight were embedded in the night sky like diamonds, adding a few scattered glimmers to the pitch-black night, allowing the people in the yard to roughly make out everything around them. Suddenly, a sharp whistle tore through the air as a small bone dagger, glittering with cold light, abruptly shuttled through the rooftops like a drifting ghost. The sharp whistle of the small bone dagger tore through the silence of the night. The dim light was extremely conspicuous and carried a cold, icy aura of death as it flew in an irregular, mysterious trajectory above the rooftops around the yard. A few soft pooching noises sounded in the dark corners where the little bone blade flew past. In those places where it was difficult to see, a hair-raising scream suddenly sounded. Then 3 pitch-black figures fell to the ground in a sorry manner, falling from the roof to the courtyard with 3 putong noises. When Trunks and the other 2 saw this, they immediately understood what had happened. When they saw the 3 people lying on the ground not far away, they didn't even think about it, and went forward to stab them a few times. The 3 of them staggered as they tried to stand up, but under the 2 slashes of Trunks and Phoebe, their knees gave way and they fell down forever. With the 3 dead, Trunks and the other 2 looked at Han Shuo's room in shock. They saw that a corner of a window in the tightly shut room had been lifted open. The purple demon eye in the left eye of the little skull was spinning and flashing with a strange purple light. It was like a ball of purple will-o'-the-wisp dancing behind the dark window. A white bone claw that was as white as jade leaned against the window, and the 5 white bones swayed continuously. The small bone dagger that was flying on the roof seemed to be controlled by the 5 bones of his hand, spinning in a random pattern. "What a terrifying little skull!" Trunks couldn't help but shake his head with a wry smile as he sighed. "Look over there!" Gilbert suddenly yelled. Following Gilbert's direction, the 3 saw 3 gray balls of air float out from the heads of the 3 people who had just died. When the 3 gray balls of air left their bodies, they seemed to be drawn by some kind of power and were sucked into 2 stone pillars at the side. "If I'm not wrong, those 3 gray balls of air should be the souls of the 3 people who just died. When an ordinary person dies, their soul will return to the earth. Without the use of magic, ordinary people can't see it at all." As a dark archmage, Emily was a bit more knowledgeable in this area than the others. She frowned as she explained to the other 3. "Then why can we see it, and why can the stone pillars absorb the 3 gray balls of air?" Phoebe asked in confusion. Shaking her head with a wry smile, Emily turned her head to look at the room Han Shuo was in and said, "How would I know what's going on? If you want to understand all of this, wait until he wakes up and ask him yourself. This yard is full of oddities anyways, and it's all his doing. I don't think I'd understand even if he explained." She and Emily found it equally difficult to understand the mysteries surrounding Han Shuo. When Emily said this, Phoebe could only shake her head with a wry smile. As the 4 spoke, the small bone dagger continued to whirl about on the roof. The three fellows who'd planned on ambushing had been caught off guard before they'd even gotten a clear look at the situation, and died a horrible death in an instant. It was truly an unjust injustice. However, these three were only scouts who'd come to investigate. Although they died, the enemies behind them hadn't been affected. Trunks and the others knew that the true battle was finally about to begin when the originally silent sounds of iron hooves suddenly died down. Suddenly, the whistling of the small bone dagger became even more intense. When the four looked over, the small bone dagger had already left the vicinity of the roof and was slicing through the night sky even further away. In the direction where the little bone dagger flew, two faint shadows gradually turned from blurry to clear. In the starry night sky, the two shadows were like two drifting clouds that were blown over by a light breeze. "It's two archmages, we need to be careful." Emily's heart jumped as she warned gravely. A scorching flame suddenly appeared in front of the small bone dagger as soon as Emily's words had sounded. The small bone dagger sparkled even more coldly under the illumination of the flames, and the surface of the bone dagger lit up with a blinding light. Suddenly, a few crossbow bolts tore through the air from below. 5 of the crossbow bolts missed, but only one accurately hit the small bone dagger, sending it flying into the distance. With a ding-dong sound, it landed on the street not far away. The sound of the door shattering suddenly sounded at this moment as footsteps rapidly approached. A line of more than 10 people wearing armor and wielding weapons such as swords, spears, axes, and bows filled the courtyard in an instant. The two archmages who'd floated over also stood on the roof without the threat of the bone dagger, watching the scene with cold eyes. "Trunks, you're here as well!" The fire archmage who'd saved Florida last time in front of the Valley of Sunshine stood on the roof and looked coldly at Trunks. "Andy, you traitor, you still have the face to see me? The old chief treated you well back then. The magic staff in your hand was forged by someone else at great expense. To think that you'd be with that animal Florida after the old chief died." Trunks pointed the long sword in his hand at the fire archmage Andy and rebuked coldly. "The old chief's death was an accident. He died at the hands of bandits in the surrounding mountain ranges and had nothing to do with Florida. It was all because you were jealous that Florida had become the chief of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band that you framed him." Andy looked disdainfully at Trunks and mocked him. "I think that with your intelligence, you should be able to tell what the truth is. Now that I've returned, I'll make all of you traitors pay the price." Andy first laughed loudly, and then shook his head at Trunks with pity. "Today is the day you die. You won't have another chance in the future. Don't waste words with him. Lorton's men can appear at any time. We need to kill them immediately." The other mage who'd come with him said expressionlessly. There was a lightning pattern on the chest of this person's magic robe. It looked like he was a Thunder Archmage. He was around 30 years old, and had a head of long gray hair. His body was as thin as a bamboo pole as he paced back and forth on the roof. "Got it," Andy replied impatiently. It seemed that he didn't have a good relationship with this lightning archmage. He then looked down with a slightly strange gaze and said in a strange tone, "Do it." There were more than 10 people in the courtyard, all of them made up of swordsmen, knights, and archers. The weakest among them were journeymen swordsmen and knights. There was also one person wrapped in a long green robe with a pointed hat up. His appearance couldn't be seen in the darkness, but there was a strong presence coming from his body. When Andy had spoken just now, he looked at this person indistinctly. His calm voice didn't sound like an order, but rather like he was seeking the opinion of an elder. The person's body suddenly moved as soon as Andy's words fell. An enormous silver sword light abruptly emanated from his body. The sharp sword light cut through the air as his body rose. The pointed hat on his head flew backwards, revealing a face that even Emily and Phoebe were familiar with. "Gabriel, it's you!" Emily couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Gabriel was Clark's master, and had the extraordinary strength of a great sword master. He'd always been by Griffin Legion Commander Asher's side. Who would have thought that he'd appear here? Chapter 211. The long sword in Gabriel's hand moved, and a silver sword aura tore through the air, the sharp killing intent chilling to the bone. As Emily cried out in alarm, Trunks and Gilbert had already leapt forward to block Gabriel. Trunks, who was riding on the manticore, had a cold and serious expression on his face as he raised the great sword in his hand, forming a milky white circle of swords in front of him. Gilbert held a dark spear in his hand. Since he didn't practice any martial arts techniques, he purely used the tough body of his dragon race to viciously throw out a spear. The sound of metal clashing rang out as Trunks and the manticore dodged in panic with a muffled groan. Gilbert's spear had been broken into two, and his chest had been cut open by the sword aura, revealing a large piece of dark skin. Great Sword Master Gabriel's expression was cold and sinister, and he was calm and composed after that strike. He wasn't in a hurry to immediately attack, but instead cast his gaze towards the room where Han Shu and Little Skull were. The howl of the bone dagger suddenly sounded at this moment as a small, dark bone dagger suddenly shot out from the direction Gabriel was looking at. The little skeleton's left eye, glowing with purple light, focused on Gabriel as the 5 white bone claws on its left hand waved continuously. Trunks, who was still panting, and Gilbert, who was drenched in cold sweat, were both shocked by Gabriel's terrifying strength. It was just a simple strike, but Trunks had been attacked with the force of an avalanche, and could only dodge. As for the powerful Gilbert, because he didn't know how to use martial arts techniques, his spear had been cut in two by the silver fighting aura. If he hadn't dodged in time, his chest would have been injured by the fighting aura. However, just as the two were having a headache over how to deal with Gabriel, Little Skull's assistants arrived just in time. A dark bone blade forced Gabriel to treat it with caution. The spell to control a demonic treasure was a secret technique unique to demonic arts practitioners. Gabriel had obviously been stunned by this miraculous attack, which was why he had given up on pursuing Gilbert and Trunks, and instead focused all his attention on dealing with Little Skull's bone dagger. The silver sword gleam was dazzling, and under the starry sky, it was like fireworks exploding in the night sky. It formed a tight defense around Gabriel. The small bone daggers revolved around Gabriel's body, emitting sharp whistles as they danced around, attempting to deal a fatal blow to Gabriel. "What are you guys standing there looking at? Attack immediately!" Andy suddenly shouted at this time. The group of armored mercenaries who'd been dumbfounded by the little bone dagger's miraculous attacks were finally roused from their stupor by this shout. They either raised their bows and took aim, or raised their swords to circle around Gabriel and charge at Trunks and the others. Andy and the Thunder Archmage on the rooftop saw the swordsmen and knights make their move and didn't remain idle either. They coordinated with these people and started attacking Emily and the others with magic. In an instant, 3 blazing fireballs the size of millstones fell from the roof towards where Emily and the others were standing with violent, raging flames. A few bolts of lightning tore through the sky, accompanied by a crackling sound, and struck that space. "Not good!" Emily cried out in alarm as she released a dark magic spell that she'd already prepared. It was like a giant, oily green net that appeared above everyone's heads as Emily chanted. As soon as the giant net formed, it first stalled the 3 fireballs. However, the lightning attacks passed through the gaps in the giant net and continued smashing towards them. Emily and the others were constantly changing their positions below, dodging the void lightning all over the place. For a time, the ground in the courtyard crackled. 2 of the azure stone pillars were also bombarded by the lightning, flashing with dazzling light. A clang sounded from Gabriel's direction. Having gotten used to the little skull bone dagger's attacks, Gabriel's sword accurately struck the bone dagger and sent the spinning bone dagger crashing to the ground. "Friend in the house, your miraculous techniques are admirable, but your sneak attack style is a bit despicable. Since you have such a miraculous technique, you should walk out of the house openly and fight me for real." Great Sword Master Gabriel naturally thought that this miraculous technique of controlling the bone dagger had come from Han Shu, who had been cultivating in the house in silence. Although he'd seen the little skull's slightly strange gesture of flipping his 5 white fingers, He wasn't willing to believe that such a strange attack had come from a low-level dark creature. However, what the little skull was doing below immediately shattered his understanding. As soon as Gabriel finished speaking, the left eye of the little skull, who had been standing behind the window, suddenly lit up with a purple light. He leapt out of the window and faced Gabriel's provocation head-on. The 5 white bones on his right hand hooked, and the bone dagger on the ground suddenly flew up with a whoosh and landed in his bony claw like lightning. Gabriel couldn't react for a moment. He stared at the little skull in disbelief, and was momentarily stunned. At this moment, something even more shocking happened. He saw the little skull bend his body, and the 7 bone spurs on his back suddenly flew out and shot towards him like 7 bolts of lightning. "Oh my God!" A cry of surprise that only Gabriel could hear came from his mouth. Gabriel then once again became a passive defender. He condensed his silver fighting aura on his long sword and formed a tight defense around him, bitterly resisting the 7 bone spurs' flying attacks. The little skull wielding the bone dagger danced as he dashed into the attacking mercenaries. The miraculous little skull revealed his cruel side. With a bend of his leg bone and a flick, the little skull's body was like a bolt of lightning as he landed in the midst of these people. The bone claw in his empty left hand suddenly stabbed out, and with a pu sound, 5 bloody holes appeared in the chest of a middle-rank swordsman. Blood flowed out like a fountain. With a swing of the bone dagger in his right hand, the head of a nearby mercenary flew high up from his neck. Blood sprayed everywhere from the decapitated neck, dyeing the white bones of the little skull a bewitching blood red. 2 arrows whizzed through the air and hit the bones of the little skull's back and chest with a dang-dang sound. The 2 arrows fell to the ground with a clatter sound, but there were only 2 white scratch marks on the bones of the little skull's chest and back. The 2 arrows didn't seem to have harmed the little skeleton, but the little skeleton was affected as well. His body, which had been moving swiftly, couldn't help but stagger a bit when he was hit by 2 arrows from the front and 1 from the back. A few mercenaries nearby took advantage of this opportunity to greet him with their swords and spears. For a moment, dang-dang sounds came from his white bones. This series of attacks seemed to have stunned the little skull. Even the miraculous manipulation of the 7 bone spurs had suddenly stopped. The 7 bone spurs that were originally flying around Gabriel and attacking him spun uncontrollably and hit an azure stone pillar to the side with a ding-dang-dang sound. As if they had triggered some sort of restriction, a cold wind suddenly blew in the courtyard and a thick aura of death suddenly spread in all directions. The dark sky was covered by the aura of death, and not a single speck of starlight shone down. Only a blood-red evil light soared into the sky from the center. The 6 white bone pillars that had been deathly silent suddenly emitted a terrifying howl. The sharp howl, like the wails of ghosts and the howls of wolves, made one's scalp go numb. It was as if a malicious ghost was lying next to one's ear and licking one's earlobe with its blood-red tongue. Some of the ghostly images on the stone pillars came to life in an instant, each of them baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. The 6 stone pillars seemed to have become 6 evil beasts with thousands of tentacles, constantly waving all kinds of ghostly claws and attacking all living things in the surroundings. "Hurry and hide!" Emily yelled when she saw that the demonic formation in the courtyard had been triggered. The few people who already knew what was going on had already started moving when Emily cried out in alarm. They hurriedly stood in the safe spots that Hans Shaw had instructed them to. Footsteps sounded again from outside. Another dozen or so people from the Cairo mercenary band had been standing guard around the shop. They couldn't help but rush in when they saw that they hadn't taken care of the people inside after so long. They all stood in the courtyard. Dark Grand Magus Edwin and the Calamity Church's female alchemist Belinda stood together on a large tree 3 shops away. They looked at the place where the blood-red light was flashing and the ghostly winds were howling. "Can it be that the legendary curse of the evil god has really happened?" Belinda's eyes were filled with shock as she spoke to Edwin. "I don't know, the presence inside is very strange. Even I don't know what's going on." Let's not go near for now and see what's going on first. Edwin shook his head in confusion. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.